Deconstructing Demons with Marty Garza. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents and aliens. This is Brothers of the Serpent podcast, and we are coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed, high atop the Edwards Plateau. And so this special Christmas episode for you, we have, once again, Marty in studio with us.
How's it going, buddy?
Really good. How you guys doing?
We're doing great, man.
Doing good.
Glad to have you back. You're becoming one of the most requested and longest running guests we've ever had in studio and out, I think.
In and out.
In and out, yeah. Yeah, topping the charts. So fresh Marty sewed, and it's interesting because we do actually have the Watcher with us at the beginning of this episode. Watcher, you out there deep beneath your secret space station in secret outer space? What's going on, buddy?
Hey, how's it going, fellas?
Hey, great to have you here at the beginning.
So interesting stat. I'm pretty sure that Randall Carlson is the most frequent guest on Joe Rogan, which means Marty has become our Randall Carlson. I'm just saying.
That could be true. I don't know. Rogan's had a lot of the comedians on multiple times, right?
Oh, yeah, man.
Yeah. So
I think when I was
Redman is probably his most frequent guest.
Potentially.
Yeah.
When we were in Arkansas, though, he had already been on Joe's show 7 times, and that was like 2.5 years ago now, maybe 3.
Yeah.
So either way, I'm saying Marty's our Randall. It's done.
All right. Well, so Marty has another deep dive presentation, and I assume it's probably somehow related to UFOs, but I don't know. We'll see.
Somewhere it touches on them.
Are there unidentified flying objects somewhere in this presentation?
Yeah, they're referred to every once in a while.
Okay.
At least twice.
All right. That's good. Well, let's go ahead and tackle Space Weather News from spaceweather.com, where we get all our Space Weather news. Just a short update here about Earth-directed solar flare directly facing Earth. Sunspot AR2908 produced an M19 class solar flare today on the 20th of December. A pulse of X-rays ionized the top of Earth's atmosphere, causing a minor shortwave radio blackout over the South Atlantic Ocean.
Didn't this happen last time?
Yeah, we had one of those last time too, I think. Yeah. Stay tuned for update, but this is definitely today, right? It is December 20th. So
Okay.
Stay tuned for updates about a possible CME emerging from this blast site. So yeah, current conditions, solar wind speed is 575.2 kilometers per second. The density is relatively high, 11.4 protons per cubic centimeter. Sunspot number is 109. That's a lot of sunspots there, yeah. Neutron count, 9.1% above the space age average. And the KP index right now is quiet, but the 24-hour max, probably due to that CME or that blast we just got, is rated at 5, which is in the middle of the stormy rating. So there you go.
Activity picking up on the sun.
Yep, that's right.
I had a Parker Solar Probe update too, but
oh yeah,
we're going to skip that.
Yeah. I did see stuff that I saw some video from it.
It finally made it into the atmosphere of the sun, basically. Yeah. It touched the sun.
Right.
Finally.
From 2 million miles away.
That's right. I don't think that there was a big release on the data analysis, though. They just, basically the story from what I remember was like, okay, it finally made it.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll probably be seeing stories about what kind of data it collected.
Yep.
Pretty soon after they analyze it all.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. There was some pretty cool video. I don't know if it was video, but it was like time-lapse footage of images from it showing like where you could see like all this crazy atmosphere. I don't know what the visual spectrum it was using for the cameras, but you could see it passing through waves of stuff coming off the sun, and just, I don't know, it was really cool.
Yeah, it's some kind of weird cameras it has, because they've used it to look at Venus as well, because it's like doing the slingshot thing around Venus each time.
Yep.
And so it turns around and looks at Venus, but it's looking at it with some weird solar cameras.
Yeah. Why is Venus so dark? Well, it still has its sunglasses on.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we got. I got one. Since this is the Christmas episode, I got one email here. This actually was received this morning, so it was sent in. It was timely. This is from LP who's in the Discord named Drew. So I'll read the beginning of this, and then we'll see how this goes. It says, Snake Bros, my wife recently bought a used copy of the classic American Christmas poem, "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." As I was reading it with these eyes, I noticed how the description of the visiting St. Nicholas sounded familiar. Below is my rendition of the story where the context of the visit has been amended, but the description of the visitor remains largely the same. I hope you guys enjoy this. Thanks for all that you do. Merry Christmas, Snakes! From LP. All right, here we go. "'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the pit, a few snakes were stirring, but only a bit. Janus had posted some pictures and links, and Frank had some vids that were making me think. To a snake's note I listened while snug in my home, reconsidering stories of fairies and gnomes. Kyle was on it, and then Russ made a joke. I was all settled in with a brew and a smoke. When out of the ether came some resonant matter, I put down my smokes and my beer with a clatter. Away to the window I walked with some dread, and I hoped to see nothing and get into bed. The moon made refractions of electrical snow and Magonian luster on the objects below, when what to my mind's eye should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer. There was a little old driver moving a little too quickly, and I knew, thanks to Marty, these creatures are tricky. I was surely dumbfounded when the humming sound came. Though he spoke not a word, I heard the animal's name. Now Michael, Ezekiel, now Prancer and Vixen, Gabriel, Tehote, and Melchizedek with them. To the top of the world, to the stars came the call. Now dash away, and dash away all. And as dry leaves before the wild hurricane fly, anomalous movements the physics decry. So up on the house, mesmerized as they flew, with a sleigh full of gifts and the good driver too. And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. I was stricken with fear and could not make a sound. Down the chimney the driver came, in with a bound. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A tiny trapper or hunter, a wild man to be sure, smelled strongly of sulfur and left dirt on my floor. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry. His cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His smiling old mouth like the lost Indrid cold, but the beard of his chin was as white as the snow. A stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed for a moment in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying his finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod, up the chimney he rose. He appeared in his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim as he flew out of sight, "No one will believe you! Now have a good night!" That's good. Snake Bros version of The Visit of Santa. It is kind of like a UFO, elfy UFO story. All right. So, we do have other emails that came in over the months about the previous UFO episodes. So we'll have to tackle those at some point. So we could do some of that on the Patreon and then later release it on the main feed. And the Patreon people would get early access. But we still want Marty to come back for like an open discussion.
He won't. He'll fill up his computer full of notes.
Right. You're not allowed to make any more notes after this episode until we have that open discussion.
I already have notes for 2 more episodes.
All right. Well, you're not allowed to plan another episode. All right. Well, we do need to tackle some of those emails, and I want you to be here for it. So
Yeah, we can hit a couple of them in the Patreon after this. We're going to sort of dissect the last 2 episodes. I'm kind of viewing, a history of unlikely coincidences as kind of like a mini series within the UFO series. So there were obviously a lot of questions that came up as a result of those episodes, and maybe some things were not maybe fully understood in terms of where I was kind of going with some of the information. So hopefully this will give listeners a little bit better understanding of the direction. I may not spell anything out. Again, there are no conclusions made in any of this. It's all just information. So, but there's a lot in this one. This one's actually a little longer than the others were, but we only have to record one today, so it shouldn't be quite.
Well, can you give us like a summary or some kind of like what are we looking at here? What are we gonna? What's the overall?
There is an explanation of it at the beginning of this, so I think this will be kind of a marathon episode, probably.
Okay. Well, the title here is Deconstructing Demons.
Deconstructing demons. Yeah, I heard that.
And we have a quote here: "Deities have appeared in forms so visible that they have compelled everyone who was not senseless or hardened in impiety to confess the presence of the gods." That's Marcus Tullius Cicero. All right. Allow me to begin this presentation with an acknowledgement of the complexity of the innumerable characters discussed thus far in this multi-part series and how they relate to each other. I often warn that my presentations will be challenging to the version of the phenomenon built up in most people's minds. We have discussed this off-air beforehand, but we all agree that on Brothers of the Serpent, we don't dumb down the discussion to make it palatable for the mainstream. This podcast is for those who hunger for esoteric knowledge, and accessing esoterica means looking past the surface and diving deeper for what lurks below. And in doing so sometimes requires venturing beyond one's personal comfort zone. In the years leading up to the months of compiling information for A History of Unlikely Coincidences, you remember which episode that was?
213 and 214.
213 and 214. I asked myself many of the same types of questions it has surely raised in the minds of the listeners, and it was exactly those type of questions that guided me along the path of discovery. Consistent with that effort, the following deconstruction of the preceding episodes will probe deeper into topics that may superficially appear to be purely theological to some. However, I urge you to be perceptive of other more esoteric interpretations. I do feel that I have thus far been at least somewhat successful in broadening the parameters of the phenomenon in people's minds, as demonstrated by the enormous amount of discussion the series has created in the Discord, and the fact that we were able to engage in over 8 hours of conversation without a single mention of mint candies. What?
Tic Tacs.
Okay. I'm like, is this a weird Christmas reference? My goal from the beginning has been to emphasize my belief that the phenomenon is far more intrinsic to who we are as a species than focusing entirely on the providence of lights in the sky and what type of propulsion method they employ. Yeah. So take a deep breath and let's begin. Near the conclusion of Brothers of the Serpent, episode 215, Indistinguishable from Magic, there were references made to a multitude of strings on a corkboard and a long discussion of assumed cause and effects, suggesting that the information I presented in A History of Unlikely Coincidences might have been a form of, how do you say this word?
Pareidolia.
Pareidolia, seeing patterns where none truly exist. Allow me to counter that with the observation that it is not unusual for people to fail to recognize certain patterns because the implications that could be drawn are in stark contrast with their belief systems. I cannot emphasize enough the fact that there is but one indisputable continuous string that runs from Enoch to John Dee and his development of Enochian magic, Rosicrucianism and the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, to Helena Blavatsky and the Theosophical Society, to Aleister Crowley, Ordo Templi Orientis, to Thelema, to Jack Parsons, Marjorie Cameron, to L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology, to Operation Often and the Stanford Research Institute, and directly to the cabal in Washington, D.C., known as the Collins Elite. A History of Unlikely Coincidences was comprised of 3 historical strata. The most obvious layer was the one I just pointed out, which was the occult links to the phenomenon. The second layer was the perceived interaction of non-physical intelligence with mankind, exampled through the stories of Joan of Arc, Joseph Smith, Adolf Hitler, Francis Swan, the Philip experiment, Patient A.B. from the British Medical Journal, Dr. Tom Zinser, Elizabeth Gilbert, and the ancient concept of the genius the various mathematicians discussed, all the way up to Timothy Taylor's patents obtained through downloads of information. The third layer was purposefully more subtle and will be the subject of the next episode. No.
Yeah, a couple of episodes down the road.
Right. In episodes 214 and 215, Kyle also made several comments questioning the lack of apparent logic to many of the actions discussed. This is a common position assumed by skeptics, which anchors opinion to motive. It surreptitiously substitutes factual events for hypothetical scenarios. In other words, it asks the question, why would someone do something, rather than why did someone do something? So imagine yourself as a juror in the trial of a serial murderer. The prosecution presents evidence that places the defendant at multiple scenes of the crimes, whose fingerprints are on the murder weapons, and numerous witnesses provided corroborating descriptions of the individual at the various scenes over an expansive period of time. Could you find the defendant not guilty simply because the prosecutor could not establish a clear motive? Maybe the motive could not be determined because it makes no sense to anyone other than the perpetrator. Maybe the motive is not something perceivable on a case-by-case basis, and the pattern is only visible across all of the crimes. Or crazier yet, just maybe the perpetrator was simply following directions he himself did not understand. Okay. So you're talking directly to Kyle there?
Well, I'm not necessarily addressing, I'm sure he's not the only one that had those, considerations that some of this might not make any sense. We have a tendency to look at things from a personal, or I guess you could say human perspective. This occurred to me in your discussion in the previous episode, discussing the properties of the king's chamber and the resonances and all, and you're trying to reverse engineer intent. Like, what was the purpose of this? Why did we? And keep in mind, you're trying to ascertain the intentions of, butt flaps.
Yeah.
And it's still beyond our ability. And these are humans, right? That you cannot understand what it was that they were trying to achieve. So if you can't figure out what, people who were less advanced than we are, what are the odds of you determining what the intent of a more advanced species was?
Yeah, but I think Kyle was asking those questions about people. Like, why would they do this? Not necessarily. Well, I mean, maybe you were. Were you asking that about the entities, or were you asking that about people? Like, I know the stuff with...
Yeah, they were just generalizations of, like... for example, I mean, you didn't give any examples, but one of the examples I thought of was, like, why would demons want to kill all people if their purpose was to, like, use people for power?
Yeah.
Like, well, if they need more souls for power, then make more people, right? That was the thing. It's like, why would you be making less of them if you need more?
Yeah.
It's just it is using logic, but you have to take all of these bits of information that you're bringing to the table as fact, which there's nothing really suggests that we know that somebody actually walked into somebody else's office and went into a trance and really said some shit. Those things you have to accept as, like, okay, that did happen, and then analyze it. So it's like that's kind of what I was doing for the most part.
Okay, well, we'll get to those points in just a second. That is addressed in this.
Yeah, but so the basic point is like you're saying that plenty of this evidence is basically anecdotal.
It's anecdotal, but if you accept it as fact, then you apply logic to the situation. It's like, well, that makes no sense in some cases.
Yeah. Okay.
So then it brings to question: are these accounts actually legit?
Yeah.
That's, I guess, my point.
Yeah, that's always a question.
I will respond to that, but it's in the text.
Okay. All right, another quote here. You come to us with no evidence, no record, no artifacts, only a story that, to put it mildly, strains credibility. Over $500 billion were spent, dozens of lives were lost. Are you really going to sit there and tell us we should all just take this on faith? So this was the dialogue from the unforgettable congressional hearing scene in the movie Contact, based on the novel by Carl Sagan, where astronomer Eleanor Arroway, played by Jodie Foster, testifies about her encounter with non-human intelligence. We could take the well-worn path of debating the minutiae of every individual claim of an encounter. However, our ability to do that effectively is severely hampered by time, availability of evidence, third-party corroboration, and greatest of all, the intangible aspect of the phenomenon itself. As Terence McKenna once said, the invalidation of the experience is an how do you say that one? Inimical. Okay, that's what it looks like. Inimical part of its structure. He claims to have had an up-close personal encounter with the non-human entities and still could not identify compelling evidence to define the true nature of the phenomenon. So let's apply this to your personal experiences. Listeners could debate the accuracy of your interpretation, whether or not the events actually happened as you describe, whether you had a history of drug or alcohol use. But none of that matters to you. You know that those experiences, real or imagined, had a profound impact on your worldview. Now imagine if multiple people claim to have nearly identical experiences to yours over decades or centuries or millennia. That could assign yet far greater significance to your simple anecdote. Project Blue Book Special Report Number 14, prepared by the Battelle Memorial Institute under Project Stork, included the conclusions of their investigation of 4,834 cases from 1947 through the end of 1954. They found that only 1.5% could be attributed to, quote, psychological manifestations, unquote, and 8% were hoaxes. Therefore, in the overwhelming majority of cases, the individuals involved truly believed in their experience, which is a difference from saying that they actually happened, right? You're saying that they believed. Very few of them were able to be proven to be psychological manifestations. In other words, like all in their head or hoaxes.
We could get into more detail about that because that could be a whole long discussion because there was a lot of criteria involved in determining which cases were truly unexplained or unexplainable. Yeah. And there's very often the assumption that, just because it wasn't a good observation, there wasn't enough information available or whatever, and that is not the case. Those cases that did not have, a lot of enough data went into a category as insufficient data. Yeah. Right. These were, and keep in mind that the cases that fell under unexplainable, depending on how you look at the data, it's roughly about 23%. But that's not to say that some of those there weren't maybe, explanations that were maybe just beyond the knowledge of the panel that was looking. Of course, it was a panel made up of all different scientists from different backgrounds. But that's not really my point here. And as we move forward, you'll understand why. In order to, I'm looking at this from a completely different perspective. But if you go on, you'll see what I mean.
So my point here is, in a sense, it doesn't really matter what we think about the validity of individual accounts. What is important is what the individuals involved took away from their experiences and what the subsequent effects were. No individual case thus far has provided definitive and indisputable proof. It's all just data. So rather than endlessly debating the validity of each individual case, my approach is to focus on the macro rather than the micro, looking for patterns of consistency on the macro scale over the broadest possible time scale. So this is exactly what I do with the 411 stuff, which is what makes it difficult to discuss sometimes, because you look at you have to look at a bunch of individual cases, many of which have missing data that can probably never be recovered, right? So you start to see a pattern across all these, and then you have to ask yourself, like Kyle and I have done multiple times, like, does this mean anything, or is this pattern emerging because there's missing data?
Exactly. In other words, applying that, like let's say we use that as an example of the point I'm trying to make. Let's say you're analyzing these 411s, and you find that there's a case where a guy. I don't remember what that phenomenon is with it, where people get they're freezing
paradoxical undressing.
where they strip down. So because you find a case or you're determined that is a real thing, that is a real phenomenon, and then you use that and you apply it to all 411 cases.
Yeah.
And then, but when you actually dive into the data, you find that is not consistent with the findings of a lot of these cases.
Right. Yeah. Like
So
some
you
people
can't-
shed their clothes
right.
when it's not cold is one example. Yeah.
Right. In other words, so you have to be cautious to not try to use, one size fits all solutions for every case.
That's right. Okay. Okay. So if we were to create a 3D graph with the x-axis representing the experiencer's perception of the phenomenon, the y-axis representing the action or conduct of the phenomenon, and the z-axis representing time as we plug in data points, we may begin to see patterns emerge. If the input data is truly random, we should just see a scatter pattern. But where there is corroboration, we should begin to see nodes or clusters. These are the areas suggestive of legitimacy or intent. For example, a data point on the XY intersect, which has corroborative points extending far into the z-axis, means this is a facet that has historical precedent. If that data were to be representative of an area where there is legitimate debate whether military technology might be responsible, the z-axis may serve to validate or falsify that assertion. Let's see. So the z-axis was
Time.
That's right.
Let me give you an example. Let's say there are sightings of triangular craft. And these things are reported, in the Hudson Valley. They're reported in Sedona. There's these clusters of these repeated sightings of these triangular craft. And then you say, okay, well, we know that they were developing the B-2 bomber during the time period when the Hudson Valley sightings were occurring. So even though that was taking place in Nevada, let's say at Area 51 or out, in Palmdale or whatever. But you say, okay, this is the other end of the country, but we know they're both triangular, so they must be B2s. So if we were to plug that data into this, theoretical graph, right? You have, okay, this is what the witnesses describe, right? So it's this black triangular shape. Then it has this characteristic. It's silent, it's hovering, it's doing all these things. All right, so that creates a data point. And again, we could argue whether the people really saw it or not, or whether it was birds, but we'd say that's irrelevant for the purposes of what we're trying to accomplish here. So you have this data point that says, okay, these people, real or imagined, have reported seeing this certain phenomenon. So you start collecting those. You just start taking all sorts of cases, and then just things standouts. I recently read the Book of the Damned. There are a bunch of triangular UFOs reported in accounts from 1800s, and I'm not talking about late 1800s, like during the Great Airship period. Yeah. Prior to that. So okay, so now you've got these data points that match the descriptions of the 1980s, 1990 sightings, but they're going back into periods when we know there was no development of that type of. So it's not solving the mystery. It's just telling us, look, this is something that's been happening for some period of time. And as you start plugging more and more data points into this thing, going back maybe thousands of years, it starts giving you an idea of maybe areas that need to be focused on. They're not anomalous data points. They're consistent data points.
Yeah. Well, at the very least, you would say that those early sightings were not the B-2.
Right. I guess the way I look at this is that if somebody says let's say they make some report that turns out to be something mundane that really wasn't. When you create this system where you have all these data points plugged in, each individual point starts to have less importance. In other words, so they're not skewing the picture. In other words, if this guy was just a bad observer and reported things inaccurately, or was just some unusual phenomenon that was just seen, or some prosaic thing that was seen from an unusual perspective, and it gave the illusion of something, those things become less important.
Yeah.
If somebody's lying, or they're not going to show.
Valet says that too. That analyzing vast numbers of cases in that way can show you, like, well, here's a group that, here are ones that all fit together, that have strange, like, for example, like he has strange data points that isn't widely known by the general public, and he sees a bunch of those in multiple reports. He's like, okay, these seem to have more validity because all these people all like named off like similar very strange things that people don't normally talk about, whereas these over here don't have as much credibility because they're basically, it's all pop culture or whatever. Like he says, you can see that stuff emerging, not perfectly, but it's a way to.
Some things I have to think, because I want to make sure I don't step on points that I'm actually going to make later, or things that will be in other episodes. But the
don't do that. You can say stuff.
Okay. There and this is something we discussed in the Discord recently, that a big problem that has only recently maybe starting to be addressed was the fact that the truly unusual cases, which were referred to as high strangeness cases by Alan Hynek, those cases, for the most part, for the majority of, if let's say we start talking about the more modern UFO era beginning in the 1940s, let's say 45 to 47, those cases were almost entirely filtered out. Either when they were, typically the way the UFO reports would make their way to Blue Book or to Sign or Grudge, any of the investigations, is they were usually reported to the police first, the local police, and then the police would forward that on to the military, whether it was the Army Air Force, or then later the regular Air Force. A lot of times, Hynek found that the police would get reports of these really strange things that we are now beginning to discuss.
Yeah, and they would filter.
And they would just toss it in the trash can, and they say, "Oh, we would never call the Air Force and report this because it'll make us look bad." Yeah. Right. So. But he started by the 1970s. He started to recognize that, and they're like, "Wait a minute, we're missing a significant portion of the picture here."
Yeah, there was a reporting bias built in by people who were like, "I'm not going to send this on because it would make me look ridiculous."
Correct.
Yeah.
But again, in this context of this graph, even if you have this really weird data that doesn't seem to make any sense, and you just plug it in there, it's meaningless. It only begins to have importance when you see consistencies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah. When you see consistencies across weird data points, then you're onto something.
Right. Unless you have a lot of people that are fabricating the same, information. Right. Yeah,
it's a hoax fad.
Right. Really familiar with those.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Well, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more.
Keeping all of the Watchers' sports analogies
off air.
Brothers of the Serpent podcast. And Merry Christmas, Grandma.
Oh, yeah.
I'm getting straight to the point in the first segment for you.
That's right. All right. Continuing on here with Marty's book. Given the vastness of the universe/multiverse and the immeasurable expanse of time, what would lead one to believe that a simplistic view based upon mankind's current level of understanding would accurately define the complexity of reality? 10 blank 10 equals X. Occam's razor would suggest that the simplest answer is the sum of the two knowns equaling 20, but that is because Occam places little consideration for the unknown factors which are critical to predicting the correct answer. If the unknown factor is the multiplication sign, then the correct answer is 100, 5 times greater than Occam's prediction. But if the unknown factor is the division sign, then X equals 1, 20 times less than the prediction. Then the unknown factors are no more complex than the one assumed. So is the multiverse simple? Are universes and galaxies, solar systems, planets, animals, cells, amino acids, or atoms simple? Excuse my language, but what the F does Occam know about relative complexity? Life began from just a simple cell-living organism. Oh, really? We'll build one. The human brain developed by natural selection. Okay, tell that to a computer programmer. An infinite number of monkeys with an infinite number of keyboards could never by chance write something as complex as the human brain. Applying Occam's razor to the phenomenon assumes a bottom-up perspective. What might be complex for us might be quite simple for a higher intelligence. Maybe for the intelligence, creating a life form is like building a house. Maybe it's as simple as making a sandwich. And maybe, like us, just to keep things interesting, it uses the same format to assemble variations incorporating slightly different ingredients assembled in the same fundamental format. A couple of pieces of bread, white, whole wheat, rye, maybe some type of cheese, a protein, ham, turkey, salami, etc. Maybe some veggies. Lots of different combinations, but all still recognizable as sandwiches.
Symbols of universal peace.
That's right. Back when I was driving monster trucks, we had a saying we often used before climbing into the truck for a performance, and the monkey flicks the switch. That statement obviously harkens back to early days of spaceflight. Does it obviously harken back to that?
Well, for us
I know
old
what
guys,
you're talking about. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Not obvious to me.
I don't think this is obvious.
Yes, they put monkeys in rockets before they put humans in them.
That's right. As this applies to Kyle's analogy regarding the spinning of a potato, the monkey didn't actually launch this rocket into space. In reality, the flicking of the switch simply initiated a long series of processes developed by a vast number of technicians, with origins dating all the way back to a guy stomping his feet and reciting the hymn to Pan by the Devil's Gate Dam. Yeah, so what you're saying there is Kyle was talking about his analogy of spinning the potato is like, this is a trick. That spinning the potato doesn't do anything.
Right.
But there was a dude at in the tech support who flicked the switch, and that caused a whole bunch of complicated shit to take place.
Right.
And the spinning the potato was just a trick, a troll that he was playing on the...
Realistically, the spinning the potato was really no different than flicking the switch or pushing the button.
Yeah.
It's doing the same thing.
There was somebody waiting for the potato to spin.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For those of you that don't get that reference, go back to episode blank.
215.
I don't remember what it was.
Indistinguishable from magic.
When I owned a truck performance company, I regularly had customers bring in their vehicles with an issue. This could be a vibration, a noise, something we refer to as a death wobble, or any number of other things.
All of those things are vibrations. By the way.
Sometimes the customer could be very specific about the problem and under what conditions it occurred. Other times they didn't have a clue, and their descriptions couldn't be more vague. So, over the years of diagnosing these issues, I developed a route which I would take that presented a series of different conditions that, through a process of elimination, would help me isolate the issue. And then once the issue was discovered and addressed, the same process would allow me to recreate the conditions to ensure that the issue was resolved. And this is effectively what John Dee did to tackle an inexact operation. He developed the technology of Enochian magic as a process, i.e. ritual for achieving repeatable conditions for communication with non-human intelligence. I am in no way qualified to comment on the mechanics of occult rituals, but it seems logical that this practice may function in a similar fashion to DMT. They do not force entities to appear. Instead, they may place your consciousness on a frequency where the entities may be perceived. The procedure or ritual I developed to diagnose and resolve problems was similar to that I used to address endemic issues with certain vehicles. I spent a great deal of time and money developing solutions to these issues. People would then see how I resolved the issues and tell others with similar problems. So solutions that may have taken me weeks or months or years to develop, not to mention hundreds of thousands of dollars, someone could just observe for 2 seconds and duplicate it without any understanding of any of the technical aspects of how or why it works. This is similar to the story about the plumber charging $1,000 for tapping on a pipe, and when questioned, explaining that he was billing $1 for his time and $999 for his experience. Maybe the so-called bullshit occult rituals work the same way.
So-called. I'm getting roasted over here.
I can tell he was writing this all mad while he was listening to the episode.
Mad at me. I told you he was going to get mad at me.
Maybe they are put in place as a process of elimination. Maybe they are so the practitioner doesn't forget something that might be critical to the communication. Or maybe they are so the practitioner better understands how or why it works. Recognize it or not, the ritual practice is all around us. Now, with all of this proceeding in mind, let's dive a little deeper into the subtleties of the information presented in parts 5 and 6.
Okay, so all of that part so far was just kind of more or less
that was the prologue.
It was addressing some of the questions that were raised in 215, Indistinguishable from Magic, and some of the comments that we discussed a little bit during the previous 2 episodes, but we didn't spend a lot of time explaining.
Yeah,
the logic behind some of it.
Yeah. And I still think that, like any of this, like example, going back to the 411 stuff, I still think Kyle's, what he's bringing up are proper possibilities of looking at this stuff. Yeah.
I'm going to say that I'm not fully convinced either way. It's just that I can't help but see, to look at it in a certain way, right? And like sometimes I'm like, man, I think about this and I could go deep dive into all this stuff and be like, wow, and see all these connections and everything. But then there's the other side that's like, this could all be bullshit too.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily, like, correlation is not causation.
Exactly.
So and
don't get me wrong. I don't get mad when I hear, questions about certain things. My point, what it allows me to do is it allows me to think of things that I may have not considered as being a point of contention, and it allows me to either build a better case for it or to discard it. So in other words, it doesn't offend me in any way. It's just, I'm just giving the counterpoint to that. Neither one necessarily is right. There's no necessarily right or wrong to this. They're just maybe different approaches to the same question.
Ruthless questioning is basically the...
I'm saying both approaches are valid. That's what I'm trying to say.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
And on an individual basis, one could be proved invalid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We don't know.
Right. But on the other hand, I can also say, like, this is all bullshit approach. Like, we all know that story.
Yeah, I know.
Right? So let's do the other one.
Well, okay, but specifically on that topic, it was because I had also just done this, like, read that book on
chaos.
Charles Manson.
Yeah.
And it was like, this guy is just an annoying asshole.
Yeah. And I'm sure that the author took the approach that, like, all the ritual stuff is bullshit, right? He's probably...
He didn't even bring it up.
Oh, he didn't bring it up at all. Okay. So he probably thought it was bullshit.
I think his line of inquiry was more along the lines of, this case has been, like, the prosecution lied and hid a lot of information that he was trying to uncover.
Okay.
So he wasn't going into any of the occult stuff at all, just like uncovering the gaps in the prosecution's story. And he was just saying the story that we were all told is BS.
Okay. Yeah.
In your comments right there, it struck, I maybe came to a realization that maybe I should clear up. I think maybe some may be, and I think I may have seen this in some of the comments that maybe weren't quite spelled out, but I think it's best to look at this entire series as a what if. I'm not saying what it is.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is a what if. What if there is validity to this? What if, this, and I'm not presenting one, it may on the surface appear like I'm presenting one version, but there's actually several different versions built into this thing. Potential, sources for whatever is going on here. There's multiples, and this will be explained a little bit further into this, but again, they are all what if scenarios because we're just throwing things against the wall to see what sticks. Which of these seem to resonate?
Yeah. Okay. So, John Dee. John Dee performed his scrying sessions nearly every day for over 17 years, all the while taking very detailed notes of his communications with the non-human intelligence. He never published a book, nor derived any monetary gain from any of the information received, although according to Terence McKenna, who held a great fascination for Dee, he discovered evidence that Dee and Kelly sold the undeciphered Voynich manuscript, which was discussed in Brothers of the Serpent episode number 61, to King Rudolph II. I have heard that also.
He's got records of that Dee received 14,000 ducats.
Ducats, yeah.
And they don't know for what, and then Rudolph paid for it.
Yeah, so you're basically saying that the possibility here that the Voynich manuscript is from these communications, which is why they're so weird.
Right.
Yeah.
And undecipherable.
Yeah. Dee conducted his work entirely in a search for personal knowledge. His notes still exist today, as does the, what's this? Liber Logaeth, which, as discussed, defies explanation. So that would be, is this a book title?
That was the one, to refresh people's memories, that was the one that was given to him in the multiple tablets that had the grids with 49 rows and 49 columns.
Yeah.
And they had these undecipherable characters. And then they got another one that was 48 columns, and that was in English. And the angel would point to a letter, and they would go back to the Liber Logaeth and then find that character. And they went through this entire thing.
What gives you the Enochian
and then
alphabet.
He said, okay, now rewrite it backwards.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the entire book. So that's the mystery of it, that in order for Edward Kelly to have hoaxed this, he would have had to have known the position of over 117,000 characters backwards.
Yeah.
So in other words, it's a
makes
valid,
it difficult to be a hoax,
right. It makes it difficult, right? It doesn't mean there's not a way around it. You know, magicians pull off seemingly incredible tasks, but we can move on.
So, in fact, the very existence of these today arguably serves as evidence of something supernatural. Oddly enough, this is the subject of another funny synchronicity that occurred during the recording of Part 5. While discussing how the Archangel Uriel gave Dee a showstone, Kyle made a joke about someone burning documents and saying, "No problem, I have this stone," and making them reappear. Yeah. All you need is the rock. By March 1585, the Jesuits in Rome had learned of Dee and Kelly's communications with angels and were convinced that they had been deceived by evil spirits and charged them with criminal sorcery, given that only celibate monks were allowed to receive angelic visions. Wow, criminal sorcery. That's a fun accusation. What's this? Germanico Malaspina?
Yeah.
Germanico Malaspina, the papal Nuncio,
yes,
diplomatic representative of Rome, summoned Dee and Kelly, and they attempted to evade such a meeting because the angels were vehemently critical of the church, and Dee did not want to be placed in a position where he would have to lie about what they had been told in order to save their lives. So in other words, these angels Dee was talking to were critical of the church? Is that what you're saying?
Extremely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The angel Uriel had relayed that, quote, "When angels brought the glad tidings of peace and consolation to the face of the earth, they did not take it to Jerusalem, nor to the temple, nor the Holy of Holies, but they took it to the fields and amongst poor shepherds," unquote. Dee and Kelly were able to evade interrogation until March 27th, 1586, at which point Dee was forced to acknowledge their angelic communications, but carefully avoided mentioning the views expressed to them. However, Kelly was not as tactful. He berated the papal nuncio, and commanded that the church repent and bow to the authority of the angels. Wow, I'm sure that didn't go over well. Dee was mortified and was certain of their impending doom. Miraculously, the papal nuncio restrained himself from having them executed on the spot. Instead, he insisted they repent. Although the refusal to do so would surely result in their execution, the angels had a different plan. The angels ordered Dee to gather the records of all their communications, his notes, books including the Liber Logaeth, everything they had collected through the years of scrying sessions, and toss them one by one into a furnace in the presence of their persecutors. The angels assured Dee that nothing would be lost and that once their persecution was over, everything would be returned unharmed. As they reluctantly proceeded to do as they were instructed, Kelly claimed to see a man dancing in the flames over the books as they burned. As Jason Louv pointed out in his book, John Dee and the Empire of Angels, quote, by commanding Dee and Kelly to destroy their records, the angels had not only saved Dee and Kelly's lives, they had also prevented their doctrine from falling into enemy hands. Had they not done so, the spirit actions would now be sitting in a long-forgotten corner of the Vatican Library, and Dee and Kelly could well have been murdered by the Inquisition, with the spirit actions erased from history entirely, unquote. On April 29th, 1586, Kelly looked out to the vineyard of Dee's estate and saw a gardener trimming cherry trees. The gardener turned and walked up to the wall beneath Kelly and politely asked to speak with Dee, and then, as Kelly described, the man rose into the sky on a pillar of fire. What? That's weird. Kelly ran to tell Dee what he had perceived to be an evil spirit was asking to speak with him in the garden. And when they went outside, they saw a white sheet of paper being blown around by the wind that landed under an almond tree. When they investigated, laying under the paper in pristine condition were 3 of the books burned previously, including the Liber Logaeth. Really? So where are you getting these accounts?
They're in multiple. There's a lot of records to all this.
Okay.
You know, Jason Louv's book, The Empire, John Dee and the Empire of Angels, is really good. But I have probably like 4 books on John Dee.
Is it Dee that gave these accounts or Kelly?
Most of this is Dee was the one that was writing it all.
Okay. Dee and Kelly fell to their knees.
And let me also, some of this, like for example, the burning of the books and everything, there are records of that. In other words, there were other witnesses that were there. And some of their, I should also mention this, even there are things that we don't talk about in this, but some of their scrying sessions where they're speaking with these entities, these angels or demons or whatever it is that they're talking to, there were other people present in some of these cases. Yeah. Yes.
So is Kelly the first guy or the second one?
The first one.
Okay, yeah.
Edward Kelly.
Yeah. He was the one that was like, that seemed...
Yeah, had the clipped ears. He was like a con man type person.
Yeah, exactly.
But keep in mind, Dee was a very, very smart guy.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have been deceived very easily by this guy.
Okay. Yeah, it just depends. I mean, it's because it's interesting because after he gets rid of Kelly, later on he gets somebody else.
Bartholomew Hickman. He worked with him for longer. He worked with him for 10 years.
And then there's no record of any of that.
That's the stuff that was actually ended up in the hands of the can't think of his name right off. That was one of the first documented. What was it? I just drew
totally blanked on it.
Yeah.
Is he like is he a secret society guy or a magic guy? Which one?
He's a Mason. He was he's like the first initiate.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So first documented initiate of the Masons.
Right. That doesn't mean that they didn't exist before that. It just might not be documentation.
Yeah, we talked about that before.
Right. But it implies that they have this knowledge that of whatever information was communicated from the angels.
Yeah.
The Masons are in possession of that information.
And they're hated by the church. Dee and Kelly fell to their knees, praising God for their return. Several minutes later, the gardener reappeared and motioned to Kelly to follow him. The man's feet hovered a foot off the ground as he led Kelly back into the house as the doors opened before him without being touched. He led him to the furnace where the documents had been burned and reached in and pulled each one out, one by one, handing them to Kelly. The gardener went before him in a fiery cloud with Kelly following, books in hand, back to Dee, who was still kneeling under the almond tree. Dee was astonished as they were told by the spirit that all their sins were forgiven and that they would be blessed with all the gifts of nature. However, the spirit did buttress this with a bit of bad news. This was that the world would end in the year 88. Yet another long pattern of apocalyptic prophecies referenced in previous episodes. Yep.
Yeah,
I still feel like there's tricks happening here. Somebody's tricking somebody. Okay. When Inanna/Ishtar/the harlot appeared to Dee, she said, quote, I am the daughter of fortitude, and ravished every hour from her youth. For behold, I am understanding, and science dwelleth in me. And the heavens oppress me. They covet and desire me with infinite appetite. Few or none that are earthly have embraced me, for I am shadowed with the circle of the sun?
It's sun.
Sun? Yeah. And covered with the morning clouds. In 1795, the German-born Christian mystic, author, and philosopher Karl von Eckarthausen wrote the book The Cloud Upon the Sanctuary, which was studied by occultists and highly praised by the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. In the book, von Eckarthausen states, therein are mysteries that our philosophy does not dream of, the key to which is not to be found in scholastic science. Meanwhile, a more advanced school has always existed, to whom this deposition of all science has been confided, and this school was the community illuminated interiorly by the Savior, the Society of the Elect. This community of light has been called from all time the Invisible Celestial Church, or the most ancient of all communities. Is this still part of the quote?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So this is still quoting from von Eckarthausen. Yeah. This enlightened community has existed since the first day of the world's creation, and its duration will be to the last day of time. This community possesses a school in which all who thirst for knowledge are instructed by the Spirit of wisdom itself, and all the mysteries of God and of nature are preserved in this school for the children of light. Perfect knowledge of God, of nature, and of humanity are the objects of instruction in this school. It is from her that all truths penetrate into the world. She is the school of the prophets and all who search for wisdom, and it is in this community alone that truth and the explanation of all mystery is to be found. It is the most hidden of communities, yet possesses members from many circles. Of such is this school, unquote. This concept of a society of elect or invisible celestial church is synonymous with that of the Elohim or pantheon, and was the foundation of Helena Blavatsky's ascended masters. It is also consistent with the traditions of the 9 unknown men and the 9. Yeah. So are you implying here that this is part of the deception?
No,
it seems like it, because I don't know. I mean,
he's making an observation of things. We're gonna kind of dissect.
I mean that this not that there's a deception that this exists, but that this may be like these are custodians.
They're referring, yes,
yeah.
And that's one interpretation, but essentially what he's saying is that there is some body, a body which is.
And they're always
a
referring to like the
of
celestial
individuals,
beings or like
right,
the light
are
men,
the
the light
holders
workers
of science.
Yeah.
But interestingly, they are collectively referred to in the feminine. We'll get into this more explanation.
Yeah, that's right. She,
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So von Eckarthausen expands on the theme of a thirst for knowledge, stating, quote, unprepared men occasion disorder in a community, and disorder is not compatible with the sanctuary. This thrusts out all who are not homogeneous. Worldly intelligence seeks this sanctuary in vain. Fruitless also will be the efforts of malice to penetrate these great mysteries. All is indecipherable to him who is not ripe. He can see nothing, read nothing in the interior. He who is ripe is joined to the chain, perhaps often where he thought least likely, and at a point of which he knew nothing himself. Seeking to become ripe should be the effort of him who seeks wisdom. Is this like implying, this is basically saying that these, like he's talking about becoming an initiate. Like if you're not,
exactly,
if your mind isn't ripe for these truths, you can't see them at all. And so you don't have to worry about trying to hide them. They're invisible to people who aren't ready.
Exactly.
Yeah. Seeking to become ripe should be the effort of him who seeks wisdom. But there are methods by which ripeness is attained. For in this holy communion is the primitive storehouse of the most ancient and original science of the human race, with the primitive mysteries also of all science. It is the unique and really illuminated community which is absolutely in possession of the key to all mystery, which knows the center and source of all nature and creation. It is a society which unites superior strength to its own and counts its members from more than one world. It is the society whose members form a theocratic republic, which one day will be the regent mother of the whole world, unquote. See, like...
This is what makes me think it's...
Yeah.
It's just like...
That sounds like...
Yeah, we have the answers to all mysteries.
Right, yeah.
And nobody
I automatically distrust this.
Yeah,
What-
I do.
Yeah.
You need to look at the esoteric meaning behind a lot. He's hitting a multitude of subtle points. I know it sounds like, what is it, bullshit generator. New
Well,
Age bullshit,
not
but-
just that, but he's basically like, this dude does not have the certificate of ignorance. He's like, we have the answer to all mysteries. I'm like, all right.
No, he's saying that he doesn't have it. He says it exists.
Yeah. I disagree.
Well, he's referring to something, but we'll get to that as we move forward in this.
There's a lot that can be drawn from von Eckarthausen's writings. Clearly, the repeated use of the word ripe is suggestive of the fruit of knowledge, and the reference to more than one world suggests other life in the universe. His use of the word chains is a reference to the great chain of being, which is the concept of a hierarchical structure of all life and matter in the universe. Initially conceived by the Greeks, it was embraced and refined by Neoplatonism. Beginning at the top, the great chain consists of God, angelic beings, and then seraphim, cherubim, thrones, dominions, virtues, powers, principalities, archangels, angels, and then humanity, animals, insects, plants, and minerals. This is all going down the chain. There was a recent comment tangentially related to the chains concept. In an interview, Luis Elizondo offered the following statement, quote, I direct people's attention to a collection of short stories to a novella called Chains of the Sea. In the second short story, the author discusses the day UFOs arrived from a science fiction perspective. But the way the short story describes the phenomena is very similar to people in real life that have described the phenomena, personal experiences. While I'm not endorsing this story as being truthful or accurate, I think it provides a fundamentally different perspective, and it forces us to think about this phenomena in a different way, unquote.
Just real quick, just to remind everybody, Luis Elizondo was the head of the ATIP program for the Department of Defense.
We need to get him on the show.
Yep.
It'd be fun. Chains of the Sea is a science fiction novel published in 1973, which contains 3 short stories. The title story, the name of which is a derivation of the Chains of Being concept, was written by Gardner R. Dozois? How do you say that one?
Dois.
Okay, there's a Z in there. Dois? And deals...
Doses.
There's definitely a Z in the middle of it somewhere.
Doses.
And deals with an alien invasion. However, unlike typical sci-fi aggression by extraterrestrial beings, Dois' story involves a hierarchy of non-human intelligence. In addition to an invading race of amorphous extraterrestrial life forms, humans share the planet with sentient AI systems of varying levels of complexity, as well as a hidden advanced race of other people who, although living among them, are only perceptible to a small percentage of humans. In the story, the humans are unable to communicate with the ETs as hostilities escalate, but the AI assesses the situation and is successful in establishing unilateral dialogue. However, the AI concludes that humans are too irrational and cannot be trusted with the information, and proceeds to negotiate an accord with the ETs which involves accelerated entropy of the human race towards extinction. The other people monitor the development of the ET AI strategy despite neither being aware of their existence, as the other people proceed to telepathically inform a young boy of mankind's imminent extinction. It's interesting that Elizondo finds this story very similar to real-life experiences with the phenomenon. This could be interpreted in any number of ways, but I believe the fundamental point he is making is that the phenomenon is potentially far more complex than simply aliens from space. And yeah, I agree with that. I'll have to dig this up and read that science fiction short story. That's an old one that I've missed.
I can send it to you.
Well, we should take a break.
Oh, yeah. And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. Second half of the episode of the show, Brothers of the Serpent podcast. And so I think UFOs are going to come up eventually. Have we seen even the term UFO yet? I don't know. Maybe only in referencing past episodes. This is more like it's just like a cult from Marty. But we'll see. So, in UFOs Part 5, we quoted from the Book of Jubilees, where Enoch stated, quote, "For owing to these three things came the flood upon the earth, namely, owing to the fornication wherein the watchers against the law of their ordinances went a-whoring after the daughters of men, and took themselves wives of all which they chose, and they made the beginning of uncleanness," unquote. So Russ and Kyle have previously pointed out the common use of the term righteous in biblical text. Von Eckerthausen also employed the use of the word homogeneous. We also discussed the idea of clean or modified human genetics. In this vein, our resident oracle of knowledge in the Discord, Janus, recently turned me on to an alternative theory that I found quite interesting. The oracle of knowledge. Psychic medium, is this Gigi Young, has advanced a concept that I believe fits well with my analogy regarding mankind's quest for immortality. She believes that there are two types of interdimensional beings. The first are pure, higher beings, which we would commonly associate with the concept of spirit guides or angels. In biblical parlance, these would be considered righteous beings. The second are divergent, non-righteous, or unclean beings, which, consistent with my analogy, have pursued immortality through technological means rather than following the natural order and moving on to the next plane of existence through natural processes. Much like transhumanism, they have mutated themselves out of the natural evolutionary chain of being. These could be a very ancient branch of proto-humans who now want human genetics to get themselves back into the natural order. This inverts the theory of a human hybridization program. In this scenario, the entities aren't trying to hybridize mankind, but instead are trying to hybridize themselves. This could also have ties to the concept of psychic or spiritual vampires somehow absorbing human energy or souls. Yeah, I mean, I think the hybrid stuff that I've read, that it seems like they're trying to breed humanity into themselves, not the other way around.
Right.
But that's like modern... That comes from modern abduction and hybrid, accounts. It doesn't seem like they're... Well, I guess some people do think like, oh, they're trying to make a hybrid version of humans, but really it looks more like they're trying to take genetics from humans and put it into their species. So I don't know. Now we return to the most glaring of von Eckerthausen's references, that being the regent mother of the world, who was the keeper of the most ancient and original science. In this context, he's referring to a collective that is suggestive of the divine feminine. This is a concept that we see embodied in the goddess Hathor, also known as the Eye of Ra and the Mistress of the Stars, who crosses the boundaries between worlds, escorting souls into the afterlife. A devotee of Swedish mystic Emanuel Swedenborg, named Thomas Lake Harris, also wrote about the hidden Divine Mother. In the book The Life and World Work of Thomas Lake Harris, written in 1908, he states, quote, "Near the beginning of this narrative, the reason why the Divine Mother could not be revealed to the Jews whom the Lord addressed, although she was even then veritably embodied within him, has already been spoken of. She was constrained so to be hidden by the sexually depraved state of men, wherefore the Lord Jesus had to exercise the most persistent form of repression from the beginning to the very end of his life. But it was the divine lady within him that instilled this repression. As is said in Wisdom of Adepts, the woman's art is concealment during the long ages of the earth's inversion. Who knew of Christiessa, the shadows of other knowledge survived, but the deepest of all was hidden with the most studious care till the end should be at hand," unquote. What? I did not understand any of that. What are you connecting here?
This is yet another reference, a connection between science and the divine feminine.
Okay.
And
I mean, I got that part from what you were saying leading up to it, but then when I read it, I'm like, what?
It goes back to this hidden knowledge thing. That's why it's making a reference to the Earth's inversion.
Yeah, I didn't understand what that meant either. The woman's art is concealment. Okay, woman is capitalized, so this is like a deified woman. Is that what he's talking about?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I don't understand the references at all here. But I do see I see the point you're pointing out, but I don't understand what this quote is saying, really.
More than anything, I'm pointing out the fact that in effect is just another restatement of exactly what I said here, is what the daughter of Fortitude said to John Dee.
Okay.
That science dwelleth within her, and that she was repressed.
Oh, okay. All right. So Harris's words are eerily reminiscent of those spoken to Dee by the daughter of Fortitude. Okay. Yeah. Harris's reference to a divine lady brings us right to the point where we left off in episode 214 with Chris Bledsoe's encounter with the lady. I was pleased that Chris's son Ryan recently joined the Discord, and I have stated that I'm personally convinced that they are being 100% honest in relaying the details of their encounters. However, as I pointed out in the episode, it is hard to ignore the gravity those encounters have created, which has served to draw in several individuals with ties to the intelligence community. Ryan has stated publicly that through their dealings with these individuals, they have been told that these individuals know the lady is real. The most obvious parallel to be drawn from Chris Bledsoe's encounters with the lady is to Marian apparitions. In other words, like the visions of the Virgin Mary. That's what you're talking about?
Yes.
But these parallels should not be limited to the lady alone, but also to the circumstances surrounding his encounters. As discussed previously, Bledsoe's encounters included a plethora of paranormal aspects which are typically associated individually with the UFO phenomenon. Orbs, craft, discarnate voices, beings, abductions, healings, prophetic visions, and government spooks. The Bledsoe case checks all the boxes. Yet, surprisingly, this amazing case has managed to remain largely under the radar, even in ufological circles. Perhaps this is because it does not fit within the accepted parameters of either the alien space brother or national security threat narratives. I think it's becoming more widely known, though.
Yeah, it's starting to get traction.
Yeah.
More so because they're becoming a little more vocal about it.
Yeah. And there is this weird crossover with the intelligence agencies. But again, I bring this up when we talked to I always blank on his name, the guy who did the book on what's his name?
Richard Francis Burton.
Yeah, Burton. You know who I'm talking about?
Not
He
sure.
was in the intelligence agencies, and he told us, once you get high up in the IC community, you find out everybody's interested in this stuff, whether it's occult or UFOs. There's like an overlap there.
Yeah, that Richard Ramirez has appeared on a few different podcasts and YouTube channels lately, and he's been discussing a lot of those connections. I think some of them are a bit of a stretch, but
Bosley, Walter Bosley.
God.
Okay. Arguably, the most famous Marian apparition case would be that which took place in Fatima in Portugal in 1917 when the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared to 3 children on multiple occasions. This series of encounters entailed not only apparitions, but prophecies and light phenomena. When the encounters culminated on October 13th in 1917, this involved an event that was dubbed the Miracle of the Sun, where a torrential rainstorm was interrupted by an apparition accompanied by a large, brilliantly illuminated rotating disc that descended from the sky over the upwards of 100,000 witnesses in attendance. Immediately following this, the drenched clothes of the witnesses, as well as the ground upon which they stood, was completely dry.
We've seen that effect before, remember?
Yeah.
We talked about that on Moses parting the Red Sea.
Yeah. Beginning on April 2nd, 1968, Our Lady of, what's this, Zaytun?
Yes.
Appeared over St. Mary's Coptic Church in Zaytun in Egypt. The luminous white apparition appeared in the sky, accompanied by golden doves described as hovering, witnessed by over 1 million people over a period of 2 to 3 years. In Betania, is that right?
Yes.
Venezuela, the reconciler of nations and peoples appeared to over 2,000 witnesses beginning March 25th, 1976. In 1981, the Mother of the World appeared to children in a school in Kibeho in Rwanda. And beginning on June 24th, 1981, through this day, the Queen of Peace appeared to 6 teenagers in, Majigoria, Yugoslavia, where millions have witnessed the miracle of the spinning sun, including one of my close lifelong friends. One of your close lifelong friends witnessed this?
His witnessed it.
Oh, wow. And then, of course, Our Lady of Guadalupe, Our Lady of Lourdes, Our Lady of the Miraculous Medal, Our Lady of Bahrain. The Vatican has investigated and officially approved 10 Marian apparitions since it began doing so in 1531. However, there have been over 300 accounts since the 20th century alone. Although the Vatican is said to perform a rigorous investigation of credible cases, many of these are rejected as demonic deceptions. Yeah, the Our Lady of Guadalupe is a fascinating story. On November 29th, 2020, Ryan Bledsoe posted a picture on social media of an NRO patch from Vandenberg Air Force Base, now Space Force Base, where the military conducts their rocket launches, along with a picture of his father, Chris, with Tim Taylor, a.k.a. Tyler D. Tyler D would be...
From Diana Pasulka's American Cosmos.
Right, okay.
Tyler Durden.
Tyler Durden.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was one of the... what did she call him?
The Invisible College.
Yeah. So he stated, was shown this patch and told they honor the lady. Big intelligence interest. They know she's real. The patch depicts a dark-haired woman with an ominous appearance, dressed in purple, holding a trident in one hand and a golden cup in the other, with some type of flame that emanates from it that wraps around the trident. In my opinion, this in no way matches the descriptions provided by Chris of the lady, who he said had golden hair and wore a flowing white gown. I believe what is depicted on the patch sounds much more like this account. Quote, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth had committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth had been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was the name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Unquote. Book of Revelation, chapter 17. Yeah, I see the similarities. Arrayed in purple, golden cup, and of course associated with the mysteries. But again, you're getting, you know, like, so which side is the good guy here? Because you're getting like, well...
That's exactly the point.
Yeah.
That will become more obvious.
He's probably not a good guy.
Yeah.
Make of that what you will.
Game of Deuces or what?
Yeah, Game of Deuces. Everybody's a bad guy, basically. Make of that what you will, as there are lots of connections on the previous episodes. So let's dive into a few of these. The "that sitteth on many waters" phrase in Revelations is a reference to the Abzu, or cosmic sea, the abode or origin of the demons where the dead reside, and made drunk with wine is a reference also found in the Epic of Gilgamesh. So let's start with the latter. In the epic, Inanna is leaning against an apple tree in her sacred garden and states, quote, "I am the queen of all stars. The wisdom of life comes from my womb, which is wonderful. I will go to Eridu, the Abzu, to the deep, fresh water and the temple of the god of wisdom. I want to put wisdom to the test," unquote. So she devises a plan and during a celebration gets Enki drunk and charms him until he announces, quote, "In the name of my Abzu, the beautiful goddess Inanna should rule Sumer as a goddess. She should be the queen of heaven and earth. I will give her the knowledge of the truth," unquote. And at the end of the celebration, Enki instructs his servants to hand Inanna the 14 tablets of wisdom. Then she departs on the boat of heaven, or kingship, to bring wisdom to Uruk, or Mesopotamia. That's right. She gets him to give her the tablets of wisdom. When Enki awakes with a hangover, he realizes that Inanna had tricked him, and his servants inform him that she has taken both the tablets and the kingship. Angered, he lets out a yell, ordering the Enkum, or creatures or demons, to chase her and bring her back to him. The Enkum find her in the quay, port, or the harbor, and tell her that Enki demands her return. She shrewdly negotiates with them and asks if they believe that their god would lie and deceive her with his promise. And they find it difficult to argue with the logic and ultimately allow her to continue on to Uruk. In episode 213, we discussed how Lilith translates in Hebrew to night creatures or night monster and is associated with the concept of a succubus. In rabbinic Judaism, Lilith was Adam's first wife and considered a primordial demon made from the same clay as he. In Kabbalah, she is said to have risen from the great supernal abyss. And in the book of Genesis, Lilith fights with Adam, says the name of God, and flies away into the air and is pursued by 3 angels, ordered by God to forcibly return her to Adam. They find her by the Red Sea and tell her, "If you agree to come with us, come, and if not, we shall drown you in the sea." She is defiant, but negotiates with them until she's allowed to go free, although limiting her ability to possess or kill babies. As a result, there are practices in occult Judaism that incorporate the use of incantation bowls or amulets to ward off the demon. It is hard not to recognize the similarities between these stories, and it is interesting to note that in the Hebrew Bible, Lilith is a demon pursued by angels, but in the Sumerian epic, Inanna is a goddess pursued by demons. But in both, she rises from the abyss. So you say that recognize the similarities, so you should just point them out.
They're the same story. They're the exact same story.
Yeah, I can see that it could be. I see the similarities, but
I think a lot of this could be parables. Like they're true stories, but they're not literal, exactly like you've referred to before.
Yeah.
But in both cases, it makes references to water rising from the abyss, being pursued, and then negotiating out of that and being allowed to continue.
Yeah. Yeah, there's also the wisdom is stolen under false pretenses and then hidden.
Right. So here we have again, in Inanna's case, the queen who is now in possession of knowledge.
Yeah.
There's kind of a consistency in the stories here. Everything we've been reading, including the things, I didn't want to give it away, but including the things we were talking about with von Eckerthaus, they're all kind of making the same references over and over and over.
Yeah.
This will become a little more apparent as we move even further into this.
Right, but people like von Eckerthausen, who was a Christian mystic, could just simply and I'm not saying this is the case, but he's also looking at these same stories. Well, he's probably not looking at the Epic of Gilgamesh because it wasn't around in the 1500s yet. Or whatever. But yeah, you can look back and see in the Kabbalah and in other things like the Apocrypha that there's this thing with the defined feminine and stolen wisdom.
Yeah, I think that these are probably concepts that have existed for millennia.
Okay, are we seeing a pattern of suggestions that the deluge sent the Nephilim to the Abzu?
Wait, you skipped a part.
Did I skip something?
Yeah, start with the Book of Enoch quote.
Oh, that's right, yeah. The Book of Enoch states, God said, "Go to Noah and tell him in my name, hide thyself, and reveal to him the end that is approaching, that the whole earth will be destroyed, and a deluge is about to come upon the whole earth, and will destroy all that is on it." This is elaborated upon in the Book of Jubilees, which states, "And he, God, said, let the 10th part of them remain before him, and let 9 parts descend into the place of condemnation. And we did according to all his words. All the malignant evil ones we bound in the place of condemnation, and a 10th part of them we left that they might be subject before Satan on the earth." Unquote. So are we seeing a pattern of suggestions that the deluge sent the Nephilim to the Abzu or bottom of the sea where they now reside? Beyond scripture, what would lead the Sumerians to believe that the demons lived at the bottom of the sea? Could they perhaps have seen them entering and departing from there? So according to Enoch, the progeny of the Watchers were sent to the Abzu. What were they accused of doing? Teaching forbidden knowledge to mankind. We then have the Apkallu, who were the 7 sages described as fishmen, who were sent by the gods to impart knowledge to the people of Mesopotamia. The Apkallu are also associated with Ea or Enki, the god of the Abzu. We also have Viracocha, foam of the sea, the pre-Incan deity who was believed to have created the universe, sun, moon, and stars. And Brahmana, we have Matsya, the half Vishnu, half fish, who is said to have saved mankind from the deluge. In the Amazon, they had Yakaruna, who lived under the sea in crystal palaces but could transform themselves into men who seduced and abducted humans, which sounds very similar to incubus and succubus. We also have the Nomos, who the Dogon people referred to as masters of the water, also known as the monitors and the teachers, the watchers. The monitors sounds remarkably similar to the Watchers, and the list goes on and on across a multitude of civilizations on virtually every continent. So what did all of these have in common? They all came from the sea and brought knowledge to mankind. And one last note relating to the Abzu. Is this Iwas, the discarnate voice who spoke to Aleister Crowley, dictating the Book of the Law, uttering the famous words, "Do what thou wilt," was claimed by Crowley to be Choronzim. Is that right?
Yes.
The dweller of the abyss, described by John Dee and Edward Kelly as the Enochian name for the red dragon or demon who battled with the archangel Michael.
So you see how there's this repeated reference.
I see that. I see the stuff with water and the deep and the Abzu, right. The abyss. The knowledge, the hidden wisdom, and then whenever it starts to be spread among mankind, the other gods get mad and try to stop it.
Right,
and depending on which story you read, the other gods are the bad guys or the good guys. It just depends.
Right. Now we're gonna this is gonna take a little bit of a tangent for a bit, and then we're gonna return to that concept again.
It's hard to tell if they're ever talking about the ocean or space.
Yeah,
I think that's on purpose.
There are portals to space in the ocean.
Yeah.
There you go.
Or it's just an analogy.
Yeah. In regard to the great beast 666, many have, which is a name for Crowley, many have expressed the belief that Aleister Crowley was merely a charlatan. But perhaps, but I will remind the listener that the phenomenon seemingly has a propensity for calling upon individuals of such questionable character. Yeah. Be that as it may, one thing is certain. Crowley truly believed in his occult pursuits, or bullshit, depending on your interpretation. I agree. There's this weird... I always think of this quote I heard from somebody talking about their, and I'm sure I heard this on Where Did the Road Go, but somebody was giving their personal experiences with aliens and being abducted or whatever. And he was in a conversation with one of the beings or whatever, and the alien basically told him, well, we want you guys to believe in us, but not too much, right? So it's like there's this, you know, sometimes you see this, like they want all this mythology and stories and stuff out there, but they don't want it to be like rock solid certain. It's on purpose, is the implication. And it's same with this occult stuff.
This whole thing is going to keep evolving. The point you're making, I'm going to give examples of it as we get it further into this. In other words, this is a developing picture that I'm not like going straight to the finish. This is gradually revealing itself. In other words, these things that seem like they have no, bearing on or relevance to UFOs, they do. We just have to get a little bit further into.
Well, I mean, I understand where that this does have a relevance to UFOs. But you're like, what exactly are you going for here? Are you saying that there's a huge overlap between occult stuff and UFOs?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I agree with that. Are we break time yet?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Right there. Perfect timing.
Yeah, perfect timing.
We'll be right back.
Okay.
And we're back. I don't know if we're going to do another segment after this, but we are not.
We won't finish it in this
We're not
segment.
going to finish it in this segment, so let's get after it.
Yeah. Okay, in the book, John Dee, scientist, geographer, astrologer, and secret agent to Elizabeth I, author Richard Deacon makes the following observation, quote, Crowley was not merely a pervert by nature, but had a perverted view of magic. If his magic meant anything at all, it meant simply demonic magic. But the comparison is not merely useful, it is essential. For Crowley and Newberg, is that right? Newberg?
Yes.
Invoked the aethers of Dee and Kelly. They deliberately followed in their footsteps. And what is more, the only complete records that exist of any other persons who invoked the calls and employed the Enochian language were those supplied by Crowley and Newberg. Deacon's observation emphasizes a central connection between Dee and Crowley. Victor Newberg was a poet and occultist initiated by Crowley into the AA, a magical organization aligned with the OTO. What are these?
Oreo Temporary Orientis.
That's right. And formed under the authority of Aiwass. Newberg and Crowley had a long-standing sexual relationship, and in 1909 they set off into the desert outside of Algiers to perform Enochian magic rituals and established the practice of sex magic. As discussed previously, this practice was later allegedly perfected in the Mojave Desert by Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard, who claimed to have successfully manifested Parsons' elemental Marjorie Cameron so that she could conceive a moonchild, a.k.a. the Antichrist. And didn't Crowley say, like, what the hell are these guys doing?
Yes.
Right? In response to that?
Well, he wasn't trying. Crowley and Newberg were not trying to create a moonchild.
Yeah, he said, I think that these fools are doing this moonchild ritual.
Yes.
But if there was ever a question to the degree to which Crowley believed in his occult connection to Egyptian deities, there is no better example than that presented by historian Mark Bainan in his book London's Curse, Murder, Black Magic, and Tutankhamun in the 1920s West End. In the book, Bainan points to previously unpublished evidence to build a case that concludes that 7 of the 20 deaths attributed to the Curse of Tutankhamun, 6 of which took place in London, were in reality ritualistic revenge murders conducted by none other than Aleister Crowley himself. The author states, The gods of Crowley's religious philosophy, Thelema, were mainly drawn from ancient Egyptian religion. He believed himself to be a prophet of a new age of personal liberty controlled by the Egyptian god Horus. It is likely he would have found Howard Carter's excavation sacrilegious. The book also points to Crowley's own writings, which claim that he performed blood sacrifices of an average of 150 times per year between 1912 and 1924, some of which involved acts even more revolting than simple murder. In 1892, MacGregor Mathers, the leader of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, claimed to have been in communication with the secret chiefs. Crowley claimed that the Enochian entity named Lamb, which typically or resembled a typical gray alien, was one of these secret chiefs. So I will again refer to von Eckarthausen's The Cloud Upon the Sanctuary from 1895, which states, "From all time, therefore, there has been a hidden assembly, a society of the elect. The elect are united in their truth, and their chief is the light of the world himself, Jesus Christ, the one anointed in light, the single mediator for the human race, the way, the truth, and the life, primitive lights, wisdom, and the only medium by which man can return to God." It is curious to note that in his Dead Souls exhibition in 1919, the portrait Crowley exhibited of Lamb was simply captioned, "The Way." So you're making more connections here by turns of phrase used by these different people?
Yes.
Okay. In the spirit of unlikely coincidences, I have one more curious story to add. In Crowley's autobiography, The Confessions of Aleister Crowley, he tells a story from his youth that curiously may have had long-term implications on his future perversions. He writes that at the age of 14, a new parlor maid took it into her head to better herself by getting a stranglehold on the young master. The young boy returned the flirtation until, as he stated, "I brought things to a point. I made an excuse for staying away from the morning meeting, got the girl into my mother's bedroom, and made my magical affirmation." What?
He had sex with his maid on his mother's bed.
Right. Upon hearing a rumor about such an affair, the boy's devout Christian mother had him interrogated by his uncle. The young Crowley initially denied anything of the sort. However, after persistent questioning, he negotiated a pardon in exchange for turning state's evidence against the parlor maid, claiming that he had been led astray by bad companions. The parlor maid was immediately fired. Thrown onto the streets with a scarlet letter, the woman was forced into a life of prostitution. As if this fate were not unfortunate enough, according to Crowley, this woman would ultimately become a victim of the infamous Jack the Ripper. Wow. Crowley was the Ripper. There you go. Mystery
No,
solved.
he wasn't the Ripper. She was a victim.
I know. I'm just saying, yeah.
He had motive.
Right. Everyone has seen a movie that starts with the final scene and then jumps back in time to explain how the characters got there. The writers artfully draw us into the story, and we soon forget that we were already told what is going to be the result. Maybe the answers we seek were provided long ago, and we have been lured into forgetting what we were told from the outset. We may also have a more contemporary version of that same scenario. It appears that Lou Elizondo and Christopher Mellon have been quite successful in rallying support from the media and the ufological community by convincing everyone that although UFOs are real, no one at the Pentagon is taking the subject seriously. They have been pushing for an official investigation in Congress, emphasizing their belief that UFOs may pose a potential threat to national security, and we need an in-depth study to know what we are dealing with. I agree, but I think what this pushes for is for an official investigation that's also public. You know, I don't think that these guys think that there haven't been official investigations. They just know that those official investigations have been.
It's an angle, but I'm making
secret.
I'm making a different point.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's an angle.
In previous episodes, I have referred to quotes from Elizondo, George Knapp, Daniel Sheehan, and Robert Bigelow, claiming that a cabal of Christian fundamentalists at the Pentagon shut down OSAP, BAS, and ATIP because of their belief that the phenomenon was demonic in nature. And those would be names of previous investigatory programs into the UFO stuff, right?
Yes.
Yet by their own admission, seemingly at every turn, there are those at the Pentagon who have been telling them that they already know what's behind the phenomenon. but UFO proponents won't take yes for an answer and find the conclusion unacceptable, so they continue rallying. Interestingly, what are you saying there? That people at the Pentagon are saying, well, we already know what this is, so we don't need to investigate it. It's evil.
Right.
And the regular UFO community just won't take that as an answer.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I kind of agree with them. That it should still be investigated, even if that's a possible answer.
Well,
yeah. Interestingly, I recently discovered an interview with Russell Targ, head of the CIA's Project Stargate, where he states that the long-running program was shut down in 1995 because, quote, the religious fundamentalists in Congress were teasing the CIA over having this classified mumbo-jumbo that may be demonic and may be dealing with the Antichrist, and the CIA didn't want to handle that. That's literally what we are dealing with. Parts of the CIA and parts of Congress felt that this was an unchristian thing to be doing, unquote. So here we have yet another program that was shut down 17 years before OSAP on the exact same grounds, being that the phenomenon was demonic in nature. And again, we have the same apparent dismissal of the Pentagon's stated conclusion. So let me ask, do any of you honestly believe that no branch of the military has clandestinely investigated the phenomenon? Do you honestly believe that they have simply ignored the incursions into nuclear weapons facilities and restricted airspaces? Do you really believe that they don't know far more than we are being told? So, if internally some of those at high levels in positions to know keep insisting that it is demonic, why won't anyone believe them? Well, because they feel like this insistence that it's demonic is a Christian bias.
Okay.
That's why.
Right. So
yeah.
Let's move forward.
During an interview well, I'm just answering your question.
Yeah.
Come on. During an interview conducted on May 20th, 2021, UFO researcher Richard Dolan asked Lou Elizondo the following. A number of years ago, Nick Redfern wrote a book about the so-called Collins elite, which is essentially what he identified was a group of religious Christians, perhaps evangelical Christians, within the military that see UFOs as demonic. Now, is that what you're kind of referring to indirectly? Elizondo shockingly responded, that's precisely what I'm referring to. That's not shocking. It's like that connection was easy to make, I think, right?
Well, yeah, but in other words, he's confirming the existence of the Collins elite.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, it's the Collins elite, yeah. Did Elizondo confirm the existence of the Collins elite? I believe so. But he continued, look, radicalism is radicalism. It doesn't matter if it's Islam or Christianity or Judaism or anything else. But before we go and persecute them, let me ask each and every one of you to look in the mirror, because within ufology itself, we have that same level of bias and persecution occurring right now, but it's not necessarily religious. It's almost occultist. There are people out there that are pushing a narrative that don't want you to ask the hard questions because it's a threat to their narrative and what they believe and what they have been pushing on other people. So before we go throwing stones and say, oh, look, the government, they're bad, let's make sure we first look in the mirror and point to ourselves and say, hey, I am guilty of doing the same thing. Or am I guilty of doing the same thing? Because the UFO community is just as guilty as a government for having these radical ideas. I just want to make sure we're fair. That's all. Okay, so that whole thing was a quote from Elizondo.
Right.
So what is he saying there? Like, yeah, okay, so people thinking that this could be demons is what we see as a Christian bias, or maybe just a Abrahamic religion bias. But he's saying, like, we all have biases.
Right. So if you take that the mainstream ufological narrative is that these are alien beings from another planet.
Yeah.
He's saying that,
that's a bias.
Right, that's a bias
Yeah.
too. You're not considering that there may be data that contradicts that conclusion.
Yeah.
Or that it might not be something far more complex.
Right. Okay. I recently listened to a podcast on the subject of the Collins elite, and it did a very good job of restating the stereotypical depiction of the group as dogmatic fundamental Christians who approach the phenomenon from a position chock full of religious preconceptions. Be that as it may, for anyone with the benefit of at least an elementary level of reading comprehension, who has actually taken the time to read Final Events, which would be the book from Nick Redfern, it should be quite obvious that such a depiction is a gross mischaracterization of the facts as stated by Nick Redfern in the book. First, let me emphasize the fact that the DoD, CIA, NSA, DIA, etc., are not in the business of pursuing scientific mysteries for what? Inutile. Don't know that word.
Pointless.
Okay. Self-gratification. When they invest in scientific investigation, it is for the purposes of military or strategic exploitation. The claims made by members of the Collins elite were not that they simply investigated the phenomenon. They boldly assert that they successfully engaged with the phenomenon in an obsessive effort to weaponize its capabilities. Yeah. And let's see. There was something else I wanted to reply to here. Where is it?
It's occurred to me, listening to all this, that these intelligence agencies may be digging into this stuff because they are investigating people that are engaged in it because they can become fanatics and do crazy shit.
Yeah.
It's like
it's just weird because the CIA is not supposed to do internal.
Of course not.
Right. But
and surely they don't.
Yeah. Right. That would be the FBI. They're supposed to do that stuff. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Good point.
Yeah. But, so that people in the future are like digging through past records and like, what the heck were intelligence agencies meddling around with this weird, stuff? Well,
that's my point. They're investing in research into these things, multiple agencies.
Yeah, so that they can have freaking spooks like
watching these people that they think are
show up and know all of this stuff that these other people, engage in.
But
so that
like,
they can
for example,
embed themselves.
that like as far as investigating, the activities of occult practitioners and things like that, that would be in the purview of like the FBI or something. But why would the Air Force and why other branches of the military, NASA, be involved in those type of investigations? There's got to be something else going on. In other words, they're investing money, and I use the word invest to derive something from it that's useful to them.
Yeah. Well, and again, going back to Valet, he has pointed out that like intelligence agencies or large governmental investigatory bureaucracies, at least, not necessarily always the CIA, but they will embed people in these UFO cults.
Oh yeah, absolutely, no doubt
and
about it.
The I guess what Kyle's pointing out is the obvious and open answer is like because they're worried that this cult may become really weird, and do dangerous stuff. But it's also possible that they're, I don't know, like, that they may be actually looking at what they're doing to see if something real is happening.
Well,
but it just depends on what they think is real.
You could apply that, figure that they're doing that to other radical groups, right?
Yeah.
That might be more inclined to perform terrorist type activities, right? Yeah. But you don't see them going to the lengths in those things that there are in this stuff.
Yeah. And I would say that, I remember what the other thing I wanted to point out was like this whole thing with the Collins elite and, people thinking like, well, this is ridiculous. These people think that the UFOs are demons. Well, all it would take for a normal Christian to think this is demonic is to see a connection between UFOs and the occult.
That's a point we're going to get to in this. That we have to rethink this. In other words,
they're not going to say that the spaceships are demons, but if they get any inkling that, wow, there's some weird connection with UFOs and like magic and occult stuff, then they're going to think it's demonic.
That's where I'm going with this.
Yeah,
you'll see.
Yeah,
I'll spell this out a little bit more in a minute. You just got to get over the terms. I know that they sound... I had to use the terms that people were familiar with. I didn't want to use custodian or anything because I'm actually trying to make a point about those terms.
Yeah. Okay. So we just said that the Collins elite were saying that they were engaging with the phenomenon in an obsessive effort to weaponize its capabilities. The book, which would be...
We read that. It came... that they actually had... Well, if you want to go ahead and read that again.
No, I'm starting at the book clearly states, right?
Okay.
I hadn't read that yet.
All right.
Did I?
I think you did, but go ahead.
I don't think so. maybe you're right. The book clearly states, they came to believe that the non-human entities were not extraterrestrial at all. They believed they were some sort of demonic entities, and regardless of how benevolent or beneficial any of the contact they had with these entities seemed to be, it always ended up being tainted, for lack of a better term, with something that ultimately turned out to be bad. There was ultimately nothing positive from the interaction with the non-human entities.
Notice, he's saying contact and interaction.
Yeah.
He's not saying study.
Right. Yep.
It's a big distinction.
As an example of this, Ray Boucher was shown photographs of 3 individuals in clinical settings who were allegedly killed as a result of such interactions. According to the scientists, the deaths were allowed to happen, quote, because it served the non-human entities' goals, the deception that they were aliens trying to help us and giving us this advanced technology, unquote.
Put a pin in that. That'll become important later.
The reason, The reason provided by the NSA and DIA scientists for approaching Boucher was that they believed that, quote, the DoD's overwhelmingly reckless dabbling into occult-driven areas to try to make a bizarre but futile pact of some sort with these same forces was inevitably and only destined to make things much, much worse for each and every one of us, unquote. So yeah, there you go. They're not saying like, wow, spaceships from space are demons. They're like, what? Like this just turns into occult stuff, or what's recognized as occult practices, like making strange psychic contact with, otherworldly beings. So this whistleblower type depiction of the group significantly contrasts with that of the cabal of religious fanatics being put forward by those involved in the DIA-funded investigation of the phenomenon known as OSAP. What does that stand for again? AAWSAP?
Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program.
Okay, yeah.
So let me emphasize this. I'll paraphrase what we just read. They're saying, these religious fundamentalists at the Pentagon don't want us to study this because it's demonic.
Right.
That would be the Collins elite.
Yeah.
What the Collins elite is saying is they were the ones interacting with the phenomenon.
Yeah.
So they weren't, what's the term?
Cease and desist? Yeah.
Right. I banish you, demon. No, they're not saying that. These whistleblowers were saying the Collins elite was actually theoretically trying to work with these demons.
Yeah, they're part of the team that were working with these entities, and they decided over time that this is actually just
bad.
occult and demonic.
Right.
We're not talking to aliens here. Yeah.
He's saying that they were trying to deceive them to believe that they were aliens.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Because false messiahs and false prophets will have arisen and will produce great signs and startling demonstrations so as to deceive, if possible, even the elect. That's from Matthew 24. So how many of you automatically associate Pentagon or other government officials with fundamentalist Christians? Why would the assertion that the things seemingly popping in and out of our reality throughout history are demonic automatically pigeonhole them as fundamentalist Christian? Ironically, in 1952, members of the Collins elite expressed concern that the program might be shut down if Pentagon officials discovered that they were studying demons. In 1969, the U.S. government printing office issued a publication compiled by the Library of Congress for the U.S. Air Force Office of Scientific Research, which was titled UFOs and Related Subjects, an Annotated Bibliography. In preparing the work, the senior bibliographer, Lynn E. Cato, is that right? Cato? Dug deeply into thousands of UFO articles and books. In the 400-page official government document, she stated, a large part of the available UFO literature is closely linked with mysticism and the metaphysical. It deals with subjects like mental telepathy, automatic writing, and invisible entities, as well as phenomena like poltergeist or ghost manifestations and possession. Many of the UFO reports now being published in the popular press recount alleged incidents that are strikingly similar to demonic possession and psychic phenomena. So one might ask, is the United States Department of Defense the exclusive domain of the demonic connection theory? Which I guess the answer to that is no. The February 28th, 1997 edition of the London Times included the following statement. A former head of the British Armed Forces has helped to form a pressure group to warn of the satanic nature of many unidentified flying objects. Admiral of the Fleet Lord Hill Norton, Chief of Defense Staff 1971 through 73, is involved with UFO concern out of worry that some UFO encounters are definitely antithetical to Orthodox Christian belief, according to today's Church Times. The Reverend Paul Inglesby, a subdeacon in an Orthodox church, as well as a former lieutenant commander in the Royal Navy, who is secretary of UFO Concern. Okay, so UFO Concern is like a group. It's a group. Said, the truth about UFOs has been suppressed for many years. He had never seen a UFO himself, but he knew many who had. It is what they do and the messages that come from them that are anti-Christian or demonic, he added. Gordon Crichton, a Buddhist, as well as a retired British consulate intelligence officer who edits Flying Saucer Review, said the group's founders were right to be concerned. I do believe that the great bulk of these phenomena are what is called satanic. Yep, that's interesting. And what is he's saying? They're anti-Christian. Not sure that's correct, but
yeah, I don't think that's necessary.
Yeah,
but again, that's
he means Christians recognize it as demonic. That's what I think is what he should be saying. In the book American Cosmic, Diana Pasolka discusses the experiences of an eminent scientist she refers to by the pseudonym James. It was recently revealed that James is Dr. Gary Nolan, a professor of pathology at the Stanford University of Medicine. Dr. Nolan has published over 300 research papers and holds over 40 patents. He is the first recipient of the Teal Innovator Award from the Department of Defense, which included a $3.3 million grant, and received the award for Outstanding Research Achievement in 2011 from the Nature Publishing Group, as well as various other grants totaling tens of millions of dollars. He serves on the board of directors of several biotechnology companies and sold one of his own investment companies for $207 million. Oh, and it is probably worth noting that he also claims that since the age of 5 or 6, he has experienced several face-to-face encounters with non-human intelligence. 2 weeks ago, Dr. Nolan went public disclosing how he, quote, was approached by some people representing the government, the CIA, and an aerospace corporation to help them understand the medical harm that had come to some individuals related to supposed interactions with an anomalous craft, unquote. It was this research that led to some very intriguing comments he made, which Pasolka emphasizes in American Cosmic. She states, he revealed that he knew some people who were bedeviled by the contact events. Contact was not always welcome. I listened carefully to the words Dr. Nolan chose. Bedeviled was used more than any other word in this context, but other words were harassed and bothered. Bedevil means to torment or harass maliciously or diabolically. She further states, he had been exposed to communities of people who displayed anomalous cognition, some of whom suffered terribly for it. Although he did not go into the particulars of the cases he researched, at one point he did look at me and say, Diana, you know how you've studied the history of Catholicism, and they called some entities either angels or demons. Some of these interactions seem benign and even helpful. Well, the behaviors of some of the things I am talking about would have been called demonic as short as 100 years ago. I thought of his use of the word bedeviled and shuddered, she said. So for at least 8,000 years, there was widespread belief in the existence of a non-physical realm that functionally interacted with mankind. Then, as Dr. Nolan subtly observed, approximately 100 years ago, that began to change. So this begs the question, why? What occurred near the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th centuries that served to turn the page on such long-held beliefs? Some standouts for me were exponential advancements in technology, the creation of the space travel science fiction genre, the development of world wars, the rise of scientism. Oh, and some guy suggested we should all do what thou wilt. Yeah. Well, there was, yeah. Yeah, I think that, all of this, if what people call like maybe the scientific revolution hadn't taken place, then it would still be viewed as spiritual, / demonic / angelic, right? That's the point.
But
do you think that the advancements in technology coincide with like an atheistic, materialistic point of view?
Absolutely.
You think so?
Yes.
I don't think so. I think the vast majority of people on the planet do not hold those views, and they live in
People, but
yeah.
The decision
Like
makers, the movers and shakers.
The establishment mainstream narrative.
Right. In other words, it's not representative of the views of the average person.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. They hardly ever are. Okay. Lest I be accused of pareidolia. Is that right? I can never remember if I'm saying that word right when I'm reading it. Does anyone else see the potential connections between any of this? But I digress. In a recent podcast, UFO researcher Grant Cameron referenced the information contained within the book Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, written by James Lakatsky and Colm Keller, who read Keller?
James Lakatsky and Colm Kelleher.
Okay. Colm Kelleher, who led the OSAP and Bass investigation for the Pentagon and stated, after reading the book, I had sympathy for Christian fundamentalists. This looks like demons. To me, it always looked like, and of course, I could see why fundamentalists would see this as demons. To me, it always looked like, what, demons? Is that what he's saying?
He's saying, yeah.
Okay, so he's saying, I have sympathy for them. It looks like what they call demons. Yeah. In fact, the book states that researchers reached the point that they actually prayed before entering the ranch. Maybe as Russ had stated, just as we need to strip away our mental kid pictures of God, the same might be true for our concept of a demon. Recognize that belief in either is not rooted in organized religion. Furthermore, the concept of evil spirits and demons predates Christianity by at least 4,500 years. So could one legitimately condemn a belief in the existence of cats simply because they are referenced by Dr. Seuss? Yeah. So what is your definition of a demon? Something that hides in the shadows, something that haunts or torments you, something that is manipulative and lures you to do evil things, something that spreads chaos among the population. Is it an incubus or succubus? Is an incubus or succubus a demon? Would something that presents itself as a dark shadow being moving through your bedroom at night be considered a demon? Is that not exactly what has been described by countless experiencers for millennia? If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it might just be a demonic spirit from another dimension sent here to wreak havoc on all mankind. I think, so the point being made here is that the similarities in experiences say that what people call demons may be forms of these experiences. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're what they think demons. Like, in other words, the term demon or whatever, is, especially like if you have a religious connotation, comes with a whole huge explanation of what they are.
Exactly. You're automatically making a or applying a religious connotation to the term.
Yeah. Maybe
it's just a thing that has a certain pattern of conduct.
Yeah. Yeah. In other words, you can take the term and say, sometimes these experiences look similar to what is described as being a demonic experience in religious things, but the religious explanations for what those demon beings are doesn't have to be correct.
Right. It does. They don't necessarily apply.
Yeah.
That's where all this has kind of been leading. In other words, I'm trying to get to gradually.
And how do you tell the difference between an angelic and a demonic encounter? Because a lot of times the people in the old accounts are it's the same, right? They're terrified.
Well,
they don't know what's going on.
Remember,
terrible things happen to them.
Go back to UFOs Part 1, and you have Juan Perez, his case, and remember the shaman said there are two types.
Yeah.
There's good ones and bad ones, and they're indistinguishable. Mm-hmm. You just have to use your own judgment.
Yeah,
right.
I think that idea is conveyed in in Christianity as well.
Yeah.
It's
not obviously a demon.
Bad guys can come pretending to be good ones.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, another way you could look at this is that, and I think you were making this point originally, is that these things being described in these religious texts, these ancient texts, are the same phenomena that are being observed today, but we, like modern society, has built up a ideas about what the ancient texts are describing and are not connecting them necessarily to UFOs, or when they are, they're just saying, oh, those demons, they're bad.
Yeah.
Imagine, I guess, restating what you just said. Imagine if scientism is a religion. It is interpreting the world around us, including the phenomenon, through its scientific religion. That's the same thing as Christianity, Judaism, or anything. They're interpreting events or actions through a filter of a belief system. Mm-hmm. But the thing is still a thing. It's not, the thing is not, in other words, you're assigning a label to it when that may or may not be, may not
but
apply.
still, I mean, if, like, you know, you could say, well, these aliens or interdimensional beings are controlling us and trying to do certain things without telling us, but they're using some of us to do their bidding and all this kind of stuff. It's exactly what the Christians were saying. Hey, stay away from that.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, well, they were right.
Unless they're the good guys.
Yeah.
In which case, do what they say.
Right. And you don't know which one's which because they pretend to be each other.
And I see what you're saying, too. You're saying that it doesn't matter whether you're following scientism or Christianity or any other Buddhism or whatever, the phenomenon itself is taking place.
Right. I'm building a case.
In other words, it's happening, and the lenses we view it through don't change the phenomena itself.
Its conduct is the same regardless of whatever belief system you might already have. Mm-hmm. It still acts a certain way. In other words, when it's a shadow being in your bedroom at night, it doesn't matter what religion you are, even if you're an atheist. It's still a shadow being. Yeah. It's still a light. It's still an orb. It's still, in other words, and it's the fact that it's deceptive is, I mean, I think at this point very well established.
I can agree with that, but you have to also include that if somebody's looking at this through one of those lenses and then they go out into the desert and start drawing figures in the sand and chanting things, they're proactively doing something because of the lens that they're viewing it through. And I'm over here saying that's bullshit.
Oh yeah. I see. What you mean by bullshit is that you disagree with the practice. I thought you were implying that what they were doing was pointless. It doesn't mean anything.
I mean, I was saying that it's even possible that if let's say there are these demons or interdimensional beings, they might notice that and they're like, they're trying to, they're trying to talk to me. So let's go talk to them and trick them and stuff.
In other words, the spinning the potato is the ritual.
Yeah.
Right. But
it doesn't do anything, but there is some entity that's like,
I don't.
Yeah. Now I can use this to my advantage.
Yeah. I don't discount that, but I think it's also possible that the ritual is not. It's not making the phenomenon communicate. What it's doing is it's putting the person initiating the ritual into a frame of mind, that
so
allows them to be able to communicate.
In that sense, then the Christians have been doing that for thousands of years.
When you go to, that's just it. What is the difference between praying and a ritual like this? They're effectively trying to accomplish
less blood.
Yeah. Of course, even that is an arguable point.
You're right. They're drinking blood in the church.
So okay.
Well, no, the bloodshed that comes from defending your religious beliefs.
So I guess the point is then, if you can just sit in a quiet room with your eyes closed and focus and pray in a sense, then you don't need all the other crap and go out into the desert and do all this stuff and whatever. And
I think that some people
spill blood on things and use candles and whatever.
I think some people that's sort of the point I was trying to make as far as that the stolen knowledge thing. That if you don't go through the process, then you don't really understand what mechanically is making it work.
Yeah.
Some people can shortcut it and just do it. But some people, in order to get into that frame of mind, have to go through a process to reach that point. I think it's like preparing yourself for something. Some people have the ability to go immediately into it and others don't. And there may be, we're working towards this point, but there may be some scientific basis for this. That's new science. That's something we just learned about. But so as we move on, we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
And all through history, you have, teachers and gurus, and then their acolytes or whatever, their followers that, some guy comes along and he has this new way of connecting, and he becomes some sensation, and then everybody follows, like people start following that method, and apparently it seems to work for people.
Yeah.
Like you have, and there's so many of these. Like you have like the Great Awakening, for example. It was like this whole new style of spirituality or connecting to the spirit realm, and it swept through the country, and people started going to these revivals and all this kind of crazy stuff that, people 50 years before that would be like, whoa, this is just, this is insane. But it seemed to work for those people at that time. And maybe even nowadays, that sort of thing is viewed as like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And I think like Bramley's whole thing was, you can still see commonalities in this stuff. How it, one person will show up and it becomes enormous, and sometimes you see these kinds of commonalities in that, and other times you see this kind, and there's always, and then like later on there's perversions and changes,
right?
Right. So it's like something happens, and then there's this, and then there's the following period and the explosion period, and then there's an adjustment period after that person dies, or what is killed or whatever. And then it shifts over to like basically the same old that everybody has been doing for 10,000 years. Yeah. To keep, like you were saying, to keep the ship going in the direction it's already going.
Yeah. I think
that would be the custodial bullshit right there.
I think there were like two sort of like Great Awakenings in the United States. Like
like capital G, capital A, Great Awakening.
Yeah, big religious fervor
revival
that
things,
just swept over the whole country and created a sensation, and and there were strange philosophies that were involved in the creation of these, for lack of a better word, ritual type ceremonies. One, for example, was that there was this idea amongst the theologians of the time that they could bring about heaven on earth.
Yeah.
And so they started doing these big gatherings, and it was loud and all this, and it attracted people. People started going and to experience, because they heard it's like, whoa, dude, this thing was crazy and all this stuff was happening.
In effect, they're manifesting something. They're manifesting a reality.
I mean, that's, if you look at this, just analyze that phrase in terms of ufology, like bring about heaven on earth. It's kind of like, bring them aliens down.
That's right. Well, bring the Space Brothers here to take care of us.
I think we need to dive into that discussion more in the Patreon, because there's a lot to that.
There always is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying,
just that facet alone, I think there's a lot to discuss.
I'm just saying, I guess my point is that there's a myriad of ways that this thing could manifest, and you could either look at it like it just doesn't matter what the method is. If it's all about the person, the individual, and their mindset, then it can be spinning potatoes.
I think that's a good way to look at it.
If that's what helps you, see through the veil, then spin those potatoes.
If you two people can be looking at the same thing and interpret it in different ways, but that doesn't change what its conduct is or anything else. And that's a kind of an odd synchronicity to something we'll be talking about in just a minute.
Well, we're going to take a break first.
Okay.
I guess we'll do a fifth segment.
Yeah.
And then
All right.
maybe some Patreon stuff. I don't know. We'll see. Be right back.
The fifth segment.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. Fifth segment, Brothers of the Serpent podcast, Christmas episode, UFOs with Marty. What are we going to call this one?
Deconstructing demons.
That's a great title. Put it in the book. Deconstructing.
On Christmas?
I'm deconstructing them, though, not constructing them.
Yeah, I noticed you haven't made me summon anything in this.
I was thinking it was deconstructing.
It is.
Deconstructing
It's a play on
demons.
words.
Yeah. It is. Yeah, that's what the title was, Deconstructing. Yeah. Okay. So we're on part 20 of Marty's document here. If my conjecture that there has been an unrecognized force meddling with humanity from behind the veil of our perceived reality for millennia is completely delusional, at least I'm in good company. Yep. There you go. Quote, "The greatest of mysteries. Why don't they ever come here or send here openly? Of course, there's nothing to that mystery if we don't take so seriously the notion that we must be interesting. It's probably for moral reasons that they stay away, but even so, there must be some degraded ones among them. The answer that occurs to me is so simple that it seems immediately acceptable, if we accept that the obvious is the solution of all problems, or if most of our perplexities consist in laboriously and painfully conceiving of the unanswerable, and then looking for answers using such words as obvious and solution conventionally. I think we're property. I should say we belong to something," unquote. That is from The Book of the Damned by Charles Fort, written in 1919. An impressive parallel can be made between UFO occupants and the popular conception of demons. That's from Messengers of Deception by Jacques Vallée, written in 2008, a book that I recommend everyone who's interested in this topic should read. That's from me, Russ, not Marty. All of you should read Messengers of Deception if you haven't already. Throughout most of history, the manifestations of demonology, the study of demons, and demonopathy, demonic possession, have been viewed from a religious perspective and explained as the work of the devil. The bizarre manipulations and ill effects described in the demonological literature are usually regarded as the result of a great unseen conflict between God and the devil. In UFO lore, the same conflict has been observed. The quasi-angels of biblical times have become magnificent spacemen. A major but little explored aspect of the UFO phenomenon is therefore theological and philosophical rather than purely scientific. That's from Operation Trojan Horse by John Keel. Oh yeah, another great author in this topic. Clues from any early religious beliefs, mythology, and folklore indicate that flying saucers were seen as vehicles of a divine race, and that they were associated with many of the sites where they are said to appear today. That's from The Flying Saucer Vision by John Mitchell in 1967. What we are witnessing is a reenactment of some very ancient myths and legends common to many of the world's religious traditions. The most obvious is the ongoing battle for the souls of mankind between the opposing forces of light and dark and good and evil, God and the devil, played out in a technological setting where spaceships replace traditional religious imagery. That's from Flying Saucers from Hell by Dr. David Clark, written in 2006. As I probed deeper, however, I was compelled to face the possibility that some human problems may be rooted in some of the most utterly bizarre realities imaginable. Because such realities are rarely acknowledged, let alone understood, they are not dealt with. As a result, the problems those realities generate are rarely resolved, and so the world seems to stumble from one calamity to the next. That would be from Gods of Eden by William Bramley, written in 1993. These visitors from outer space in many instances claim to be angels sent to prepare the way for the coming of Christ. They warn us of great disasters which are before us on the horizon. Their message is in many ways identical to the biblical prophecies presented in the book of Revelation. Yet they fall far short of the truth of the Bible and falsify the statements concerning Christ. Why? Deliberate deception is the only possible answer to that most important question. These so-called extraterrestrial visitors are simply parroting the message of Satan in order to deceive the inhabitants of this world and prepare for the coming of the Antichrist. That's from Sons of God Return by Kelly L. Seagraves, written in 1975. Was that due to Christian? Sounds like it.
Yeah, probably so. This is probably the most striking one right here.
Okay.
This last one.
We propose that the reality behind the UFO phenomenon is due to a manifestation of non-human preternatural consciousness for the purpose of deception that can interact with our physical environment and with our human consciousness to produce visual, physical, and psychological effects. The artificial construct created by this consciousness mimics our three-dimensional objects and systems and even our religious imagery. The purpose being to slowly condition our minds through subtle deception to accept a false belief while undermining our rational thought processes and our human spirit. From Unmasking the Enemy by Dr. Nelson Pacheco. Is that right?
Yes.
Pacheco?
Mm-hmm.
A former principal scientist with the Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers in Europe Technical Center, and Tommy Bland, now retired U.S. Air Force employee. That's an interesting take on it.
Yeah. I think that's probably
Slowly
the most
condition
accurate.
our minds for what? To accept a false belief while undermining our rational thought processes. What false belief? I guess there would be context in the book. Okay, so let's go back to where this story started. The Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees both describe how the sons of Noah were deceived by the demons. And there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray and became corrupt in all their ways. From the Book of Enoch. And in the third week of this Jubilee, the unclean demons began to lead astray the children of the sons of Noah, and to make, to err, and destroy them. The Book of Jubilees. The deception is well established. However, there seems to be some confusion about who is actually responsible. The Book of Jubilees states, "And they, the watchers, begat sons, the Nephilim, and they were all unlike, and they devoured one another. And the giants slew the Nephilim, and the Nephil slew the Elio, or Eljo, and the Eljo mankind, and one man another." So from this passage, one could conclude that the giants, the Nephilim, and the Eljo are three distinct forms of progeny resulting from the relations between the watchers and the daughters of men. This seems to be confirmed in the Greek translation of 1 Enoch, which adds, "And they, the women, bore to them, the watchers, three races. First, the great giants. The giants brought forth the Nephilim, and the Nephilim brought forth the Eliud, or Eliud, and they existed, increasing in power according to their greatness." The Book of Giants, another significant non-canonical text, refers to the giants as Gibborim. Is that right? Gibborim.
Gibborim.
Which translates to mighty men, an arrogant race of warriors obsessed with...
It's Gibborim, actually.
Gibborim.
Yeah.
Okay. Which translates to mighty men, an arrogant race of warriors obsessed with their hunting prowess and human bloodshed. The Nephilim, which literally translates to fallen ones, were the children of the Gibborim. It also refers to the Eliud or Eljo, which translates to glorious ones, as the children of the Nephilim, which here again seems to confirm a distinction between the three races. In 1 Enoch and Jubilees, the tyrannical giants are described as being part gods and part man. Regular listeners will remember that in the ancient epic, Gilgamesh was also described as a giant who was said to be 2/3 god and 1/3 man. And regarding Gilgamesh's behavior, Andrew George, a translator of the epic, states, "The nature of Gilgamesh's tyranny is not explained by the author, as it appears not necessary to know more than that he is a tyrant." Well, I think there's part of the tyranny was like he was just an asshole at the beginning.
Yeah,
when he
but
was
this
young.
explains why.
Yeah, okay. This is surely not a coincidence, And such suspicions are confirmed in the Book of Giants, in which Gilgamesh not only appears, but is quoted as stating, "I am a gibber, and by the mighty strength of my arm and my own great strength I went up against all flesh, and I made war against them, but I did not prevail. And I am not able to stand firm against them, for my opponents are angels who reside in heaven, and they dwell in the holy places. And they were not defeated, for they are stronger than I." Interestingly, in this context, Gilgamesh is portrayed as a demon who tormented man, but was defeated by the angels. This seems to make sense since, as discussed previously, his father Lilu was described in the epic as exhibiting the characteristics of an incubus. While conducting my research, I also discovered that the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees were removed from the Jewish and Christian canons in the 4th century AD because religious scholars determined that it would not have been possible for angels to have had intercourse with human women. But on what pretense? "And now the giants, who are produced from the spirits and flesh, shall be called evil spirits upon the earth, and on the earth shall be their dwelling." This passage from the Book of Enoch again refers to the giants as having been produced from the spirits, i.e. the watchers or angels, and flesh, i.e. human women. So how could non-physical spirits have the ability to interact physically with flesh and produce such giants? Well, perhaps Enoch provides an answer in this passage. "And Uriel said to me, Here shall stand the angels who have connected themselves with women, and their spirits, assuming many different forms, are defiling mankind and shall lead them astray into sacrificing to demons as gods." It would appear that Enoch is suggesting that the non-physical spirits of the Watchers had the ability or technology to assume physical form. Furthermore, that they used those abilities to corrupt and deceive mankind into deifying their children. So allow me to explain. Enoch continues by describing events that occurred following the deluge, which was sent specifically to destroy the progeny of the Watchers. "Evil spirits have proceeded from their bodies, because they are born from men, and from the holy Watchers is their beginning and primal origin. They shall be evil spirits on earth, and evil spirits shall they be called. And the spirits of the giants afflict, oppress, destroy, attack, do battle, and work destruction on the earth, and cause trouble." This passage suggests that at least some of the abilities of the non-physical Watchers were passed down to the giants, allowing them to endure in spirit form after their physical bodies were destroyed. And it is further suggested that they continued their oppressive onslaught on mankind. Yeah, so I've encountered this idea too, that whatever this destruction, like if the flood was supposed to kill the giants, the Nephilim or whatever, that it does, but their spirit forms remain, and those become the demons and shit that people are interacting with. And they're still mad that they were killed in the flood, but they're still around as well. Because they've been banished here or something.
It could also be a metaphor.
Yeah.
And the spirit of their spirit, if you consider that their spirit was this warlike, bloodthirsty, race, that their spirit dwells within us, who are now considered,
yeah,
bloodthirsty. Right?
I can see that. Yeah. But it's just saying they shall be evil spirits on earth.
Yeah. Well, notice this next line.
It is especially noteworthy that in these passages, the Watchers are referred to as angels and holy, and the pejoratives demon and evil are only used in association with the spirits of their hybrid progeny. In summation, the Gibberim, aka giants, were a hybrid race of arrogantly bloodthirsty antagonists who waged war against the holy. All right, you have holy in here.
Yes, whole, as in
righteous. In whole, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
First holy as in righteous, and then holy as in all of. Angels, and were defeated, but whose spirit endures, causing deception, oppression, and destruction of mankind. Perhaps this is why the Book of Jubilees is also known as the Book of Division. But if the Watchers had the ability to alter their form, surely so should those further up the chain of being. In 1910, 47 parchment codices were discovered in an unknown monastery abandoned in the 10th century AD in the village of Hamuli, in the western part of the Fayum in Egypt. Written in Sahidic and Fayumic, the codices include portion M610, written by Cyril of Jerusalem between 1861 and 1894. Due to the poor condition of the parchments, the text remained unpublished or translated until Roloff van den Broek of Utrecht University in the Netherlands undertook the challenge in 2010 through 2012. Why didn't you just say somebody translated it? Published in the book Pseudo-Cyril of Jerusalem on the Life and Passion of Christ, the book contains the discovery of ancient writings of the apostles, a list of the apostles with their worldly professions, a
Pilate Apocryphon,
an unfamiliar chronology of Holy Week, stories about Jesus' divine body and his physical appearance, the dreams of Pilate and Procla, and the story of Pilate and Jesus. The codices describe first-hand accounts surrounding the betrayal of Jesus and more specifically the circumstances regarding Judas's kiss. Astonishingly, these texts detail the need for Judas to do so in order to identify him to his captors due to Jesus' ability to shapeshift. In the Contra Celsum, I don't know, 264, Origen of Alexandria states, "To those who saw Jesus, he did not appear alike to all. His appearance was not just the same to those who saw him, but varied according to their individual capacity." Origen explained that Jesus appeared in different forms to different people simultaneously, depending on the spiritual capacity of the individual. This belief was also stated in Acts by Peter, which states, "Each of us saw him as he was capable to see him, as far as he could." Acts also includes accounts of healings performed by a heavenly light. When Peter asked the healed what they have seen, some say an old man, and others a young man, and others a child. In the Gnostic Apocryphon of John, John sees Christ as a child, an old man, and a young man, and states that Jesus appeared to James as a child and a young man, but to John as a beautiful, well-shaped man of cheerful countenance, and as a man with a rather bald head and thick flowing beard, and later as a small man and unattractive, and then again as one reaching to heaven. Such claims are also seemingly supported in Matthew 25:55, which states, "We hold that Jesus was such a wonderful person, not only as to the divinity within him which was hidden from the multitude, but also to his body, which was transfigured when he wished, and before whom he wished." This ability to transfigure is reiterated by Cyril when, on the advice of his wife, Judas accepts a bribe of 30 pieces of silver from Jewish leaders to betray Jesus. It states that Judas agrees to identify Jesus to his captors by the sign of a kiss, for the Jews cannot recognize Jesus because of his ever-changing appearance. I never picked up on this.
This is new. This is pretty new.
Okay.
I think it was published in 2014.
Well, I'm just saying, like, you're reading
some of
out,
that is in there.
Yeah,
you just
you're
don't,
reading out this, like, part of the Acts here.
Yeah, they're in
but
there.
You just take it as a metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But you're saying this might actually not be a metaphor, but that he could totally look like different things.
This next part I'd never heard either.
But by far the most astonishing revelation are the details of the events which transpired when Jesus sat down to have a meal with Pontius Pilate. During this meeting, Pilate advises Jesus to flee, but Jesus replies that he wants to be crucified. Jesus then reveals to him his divine nature by disappearing from Pilate's sight for a long time. Pilate faints and is raised by Jesus, and then he understands that Jesus could save himself if he wished to do so. Pilate is so thoroughly convinced and moved by this experience that he offers to have his own son killed in Jesus' place. Following this meeting, both Pilate and his wife Procla experience apocalyptic dream visions of darkness befalling earth and their own imminent deaths. So that was a lot to contemplate, but I ask you, are there any obvious parallels that may be drawn from any of this? I don't know. What point are you trying to make that he was a shapeshifter?
Didn't we just talk about that a minute ago, about how certain aspects of the phenomenon appear differently to people side by side? they perceive it differently, even though they're both standing together.
Yeah. But one person seeing what looks like a spaceship and another person only seeing a light is not the same as a person who can shapeshift.
I don't know.
I mean, it could be the same, but I'm just saying, like, those could also be very different things. But yeah, are you just implying that Jesus was like he was a 33-year-long manifestation of this stuff that walked around amongst people?
I'm not suggesting that he wasn't a real
No, I'm
being. In other words, but
I'm wondering, like, if that seems to be the implication here, or at least that this version was one of those things. He was a hybrid, right? Jesus was an alien. That's where we're going here.
No. You see, you're using the same. You're still using the labels.
Yeah, of course. I'm going to throw the labels out there. Okay, as I have stated before, we often hear statistics thrown around like 50% of the population believe in UFOs, but what percentage believe in ghosts or psychic phenomena, religiosity, or the spirit realm? What if they are all different perceptions of the same phenomenon? If that were true, the combined belief quotient could represent 95% of the world's population. As presented in UFOs, as presented in UFOs Part 1 by as early as 1949 with the Saturday Evening Post articles by Sidney Shallett, and with the Life magazine cover article Have We Visitors from Space by Bob Gina in 1952, the Pentagon has purposefully succeeded stories in the media suggesting that they were withholding evidence of extraterrestrial visitation. Is what we are witnessing play out in the media today, which was sparked by the December 17th, 2017 article in the New York Times by Ralph Blumenthal and Leslie Keene that included leaked video from the Nimitz encounter, not a page out of that same playbook. The real question we should be asking is why? Why vehemently deny one thing while at the same time planting seeds of doubt in that very denial? It's as if they're playing the role of Wizard of Oz, broadcasting to the public, pay no mind to the man behind the curtain. As I have stated from the very beginning of this UFO series, I do not subscribe to the belief that secrecy has stemmed from fear of mass panic concerning the existence of extraterrestrial life. The truth must be something much darker, unfathomable, and broadly unacceptable. As Terence McKenna stated, we are part of a symbiotic relationship with something which disguises itself as an extraterrestrial invasion so as to not alarm us. Right, that's classic quote. McKenna right there, yeah.
Great quote.
The implication being that an extraterrestrial invasion is less scary than what they actually are.
Right. That's what I've been saying since episode 1.
Telling the public that lights in the sky might be drones from another planet is far less disruptive to society and government rule than acknowledging that Jiminy Cricket is real and has been guiding humanity throughout human history. Is it? You think that's less disruptive? Or maybe I don't get your analogy here with Jiminy Cricket.
A voice.
Yeah, Jiminy Cricket is like a good guy.
Right. Yeah, because some of this is good. It's not all bad.
I know. I'm just saying, like, you think that...
But it's guiding.
Yeah.
Whatever this is intervening. I don't know whether you want to... You can interpret it whether it's good or bad, but it's intervention either way.
Yeah. I just don't think Jiminy Cricket is a dark secret. That's what I'm saying. I don't get.
I'm using it as an analogy.
Yeah. Again, I will reiterate, although not widely recognized or accepted by mainstream ufology, as we have discussed throughout the UFO series, cases such as those of Juan Perez, Ray Hernandez, Chris Bledsoe, and Skinwalker Ranch all share elements which boldly suggest connections between paranormal, spiritual, and UFO-type encounters. In a recent interview, Dr. Gary Nolan shared his thoughts regarding certain aspects of his research with experiencers of anomalous phenomena and explained, "Our senses are a filter to stop our brain from being overwhelmed with reality." Expanding upon the limits of human perception, he stated, "If you think a little bit about it, schizophrenics hear things and see things no one else sees. So are they all crazy? They can't turn it off." On December 26, 1972, the New York Times published an article citing a prediction by a man named Reuben Greenspan. Greenspan was a mathematician from Greenwich Village who taught at the Siemens Church Institute of New York, and predicted that a major earthquake would strike San Francisco on January 4th, 1973. Earthquake predictions for the San Andreas Fault are not a novelty. However, what sets this one apart was Greenspan's track record of accuracy, correctly providing dates for 13 of 16 predictions since 1935. Approximately a month and a half before Greenspan went public with his most recent prediction, 3,000 miles away in the Santa Cruz Mountains in California, Herbert Mullins began hearing discarnate voices that instructed him that he must perform blood sacrifices to prevent a major earthquake, which would cost the lives of thousands. This is what I meant when I said there's less blood. not fighting wars, but like there's usually less blood in praying versus doing occult rituals. The voices informed him that the massive bloodshed of the Vietnam War had temporarily served to satisfy this requirement. However, as the war was winding down, other sacrifices must be substituted to fulfill the quota. That's very Bramley right there.
Oh, yeah.
Beginning on October 12th, 1972, Herbert Mullins murdered 13 innocent strangers in the San Francisco area until on February 13th, 1973, he calmly got out of his car and shot his final victim in broad daylight in front of multiple witnesses. When the police finally caught up with Mullins, despite having a rifle by his side, he did not put up any resistance. During his trial, it was determined that Mullins suffered from schizophrenia. However, he never recanted his belief that his actions were righteous, reinforced in his mind by the fact that Greenspan's earthquake prediction was not fulfilled. Right. What's that post hoc ergo propter hoc, whatever, however it goes. Right? In other words, this is the whole because I did these murders, the earthquake that was predicted didn't take place.
Right.
Right. So there's two ways to look at that. Like, either he's correct or he isn't, and you can't actually prove either one.
Exactly.
He broke the law.
Yeah.
It gets worse.
Throw him in jail.
Vincent Lee was born in Dandong in China in 1968 and attended the Wuhan Institute of Technology, graduating in 1992 with a bachelor's degree in computer software engineering. In 2001, he immigrated to Canada, where he later married. Living in Edmonton, Lee was described as reliable and hardworking, never showing any signs of trouble. Then in July 2008, he asked for time off from work to travel to Winnipeg for a job interview. On July 30th, Lee boarded a Greyhound bus headed for Winnipeg. Seated next to him on the drive was a stranger named Tim McLean. McLean, who barely acknowledged him. Approximately 1,200 kilometers into their 1,300-kilometer trip, McLean was sleeping, leaning against the window with headphones on, when Lee suddenly produced a knife and began stabbing him in the neck and chest. As the other passengers began screaming, the bus driver quickly pulled over on the side of the road, allowing them to escape. However, Lee remained on board, proceeding to decapitate and dismember his victim, displaying the severed head in the window to horrified onlookers. Witnesses recount that Lee appeared oblivious to others and they were struck by his calm demeanor, stating, "There was no rage or anything. He was like a robot, stabbing the guy." Lee was ultimately captured by the police and placed on trial. During the proceedings, it was determined that he was suffering from schizophrenia and was found not criminally responsible under Section 16 of the Canadian Criminal Code, and was remanded to the Selkirk Mental Health Center for treatment. Under Section 16, no person is criminally responsible for an act committed while suffering from a mental disorder that rendered the person incapable of appreciating the nature and quality of the act or of knowing that it was wrong. Lee received treatment and was released back into society in February of 2017. So what triggered this seemingly well-educated and well-adjusted middle-aged man to suddenly commit such a heinous act? According to Lee, he heard the voice of God tell him that he was the third story of the Bible, right? Is that what it says? He was the third story of the Bible, and he must destroy the demon sitting beside him in order to save people from an alien attack. Good grief. Now allow me to touch on some curious synchronicities surrounding one of the most notorious cases involving voices from the unknown.
Kyle will like this.
In UFOs Part 6, we took an unexpected tangent as a result of the observation I made regarding the coincidence between the plot of Crowley's book Moonchild, Roman Polanski's movie Rosemary's Baby, and the Manson family's murder of Sharon Tate. I didn't expect how it would resonate, so let me add a bit more to the odd synchronicities. Rosemary's Baby was filmed almost entirely in the Dakota Building in New York City. The Dakota Building is famously the location where John Lennon lived and was ultimately murdered by Mark David Chapman. Chapman, who had no prior convictions, claimed to have shot Lennon because he was told to do so by the voices in his head from a group of powerful and evil little people, and prayed to Satan to give him the strength to do their bidding. Lennon, who claimed to have had UFO sightings from the building, as well as his own communications with a non-human intelligence, had once stated, "The Beatles are more popular than Jesus." Soon after making that claim, in 1967, the Beatles released the album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, which opens with the line, "20 years ago today, Sgt. Pepper taught the band to play." 20 years before that, in 1947, the great beast 666, Aleister Crowley, died in a boarding house in the UK, and coincidentally, his picture is on the cover of Sgt. Pepper.
Jesus Christ.
Some might think that connection is a bit of a stretch, so let me read the following quote made by Lennon during an interview with David Sheff for Playboy. "The whole Beatle idea was to do what you want, right? To take your own responsibility, to do what you want and try not to harm other people, right? Do what thou wilt, as long as it doesn't hurt somebody. Do what thou wilt." A quote borrowed directly from Aleister Crowley's Book of the Law. During a prison interview, Chapman was asked about the voices and subsequent exorcism he received. He stated, "This was real, and when these things came out of me, I could feel them. I could feel them when they came out of my mouth. They were different personalities, and they were different sounds and different languages." Yeah, that's a weird tangle right there.
Yeah.
I remember reading.
Who says this stuff is who says the Beatles are about just do what thou wilt?
The
That was,
interviewer.
that was John Lennon. Said
Okay,
that.
John Lennon's saying that.
Oh, is that? Yeah, okay, you're right. Lennon is making that statement while he's talking to David Sheff. It was weird because since it's all phrased like a question, I thought this was a question by the interviewer.
Yeah, no, that's
That's Lennon saying that. Okay. Legends of voices from the unknown are nearly as old as human history itself, but few stories exemplify this more than that of the Greek god Pan. No! Regular listeners will remember him from my invocation. What is this bullshit? Russ's invocation. In episode 213, which was immediately followed by a spontaneous thunderstorm that caused a delay in the recording of episode 214. Reconstructed from the Proto-Indo-European god Penussan, who represented nature, Pan derived his name from the Greek word companion.
Penussan. He'd get laughed out of here.
Likewise, Pan was said to be a forest-dwelling trickster who lured men off the trail, never to be seen again. It is for this reason that he is often referred to as the god heard but not seen, and that the word panic owes its derivation to Pan. The similarities between his horned goat-like appearance and that of the classic depictions of the devil have served to create a long-standing association between them, most notably one by Aleister Crowley, who penned the hymn to Pan, ritualistically recited by Jack Parsons before rocket tests and recklessly delivered by Russ on the show. Why are you putting this on me? This is bullshit. Jesus Christ. In this regard, the Greek historian Plutarch recounts an interesting story involving a discarnate voice from the unknown. First-hand witness. Great.
Epithes. Whatever. This dude, just say a guy. It's not important.
Epitherses, I don't know, was a teacher from Chaeronea, a small village in Greece. Sometime between 14 and 37 AD, he was traveling along with several other passengers on a freight ship sailing to Italy. One evening, while standing near the island of Paxi, The other passengers were relaxing on the deck, enjoying the stillness of the windless night when a loud, unidentified voice called out from the forest,
Famous.
Famous! Famous! Startled, the passengers and crew didn't know what to make of it. That is, until one of the passengers approached the edge of the ship. Unknown to anyone on the ship, the Egyptian passenger's name was Thamus. Again, the unidentified voice called out, Thamus! Unsure what to do, Thamus responded by asking who calls. More forcefully this time, the voice stated, when you come opposite to Palodes, announce that the great Pan is dead. I've heard that too, the great god Pan is dead. The ship's crew was visibly shaken and unsure what to do, and needless to say, this was doubly true for Thamus. The captain and crew debated whether to continue on their course to Italy or abide by the instructions given by the voice and set sails for Palodes. Reluctant to tempt fate, it was decided to allow the ship to continue drifting and either continue en route to Italy if the wind so directed or deliver the message if they drifted in the vicinity of Palodes. But the wind didn't blow, so they drifted. And when they neared the coast, Thamus reluctantly approached the stern of the ship and repeated the announcement, Great Pan is dead! And suddenly great, sorrowful cries rang out from the island, for never before had a god died. Plutarch recorded the extraordinary event, noting its many witnesses. His report made its way to the Roman Emperor Tiberius Caesar, who summoned Thamus to his palace to hear the story from him directly. After this, Tiberius became fascinated by Pan and ordered a complete investigation. I demand an investigation of this god's death. So is Pan truly dead? Or was this, as Crowley stated, just another one of his tricksome gambles? In the book The Secret History of the World, author Mark Booth states, it might be argued that, because they lived in times when even the best educated did not enjoy all the intellectual benefits that modern science brings, it is only natural that Charlemagne, Dante, Joan of Arc, Shakespeare, Cervantes, Leonardo, Michelangelo, Milton, Bach, Mozart, Goethe, Beethoven, and Napoleon all held beliefs that are discredited today. But then, isn't it rather surprising that that many in modern times have held the same sets of beliefs, not just madmen, lone mystics, or writers of fantasies, but the founders of the modern scientific method, the humanists, the rationalists, the liberators, secularizers, and scourges of superstition, the modernists, the skeptics, and the mockers? Could the very people who have done most to form today's scientifically oriented and materialistic worldview secretly have believed something else? Newton, Kepler, Voltaire, Paine, Washington, Franklin, Tolstoy, who's that guy?
Dostoevsky?
Dostoevsky? I don't know. Edison, Wilde, Gandhi, Duchamp. Could it be true that they were initiated into a secret tradition, taught to believe in the power of mind over matter, and that they were able to communicate with incorporeal spirits? So in addition to those advancements discussed previously, what other information has been seemingly derived from this incorporeal realm? In 1890, August... it's all these names, man. August Kekule,
Yep.
Who discovered the atomic structure of benzene, revealed at a science symposium in Germany that the idea presented itself to him in a dream in which he imagined a snake eating its own tail, like the ancient symbol of the Ouroboros. In 1920, Frederick G. Banting, an unknown Canadian surgeon at the time, claimed that in a dream he was told to surgically ligate the pancreas of a diabetic dog to stop the flow of nourishment. The discovery that diabetes could be treated with insulin injections won him the Nobel Prize in Medicine. In 1923, here we go again, Otto Loewy, a German pharmacologist who discovered
Acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter.
Yeah, a neurotransmitter involved in dreaming, ironically woke up in the middle of a dream, jotted down a few notes on paper, and went back to sleep. Loewy's dream led to the discovery that nerve cell communication is chemical rather than electrical, and for this he won the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 1936. In May of 1941, Deputy Fuhrer Rudolf Hess flew to Scotland to attempt to make a deal with the British as the result of what he claimed was information given to him in a dream by supernatural forces. The information obtained from his interrogation remains classified until 2041. What? So 100 years later, they just give it a century of classification there. But recognition of this seemingly unexplainable phenomenon is not a recent development. In 1595, author Nicholas Remy published the book Demonolatry, in which he makes the following astute observations. Plutarch relates that Socrates had two familiar spirits with whom he used to converse on terms of the great friendship, but it was no voice from without, says Proclus, that he heard, but a breath from within which reached the organs of his senses. Yet Socrates believed that he could hear the voice sounding loud in his ears, whereas no one else, however observant and keen of hearing, could distinguish the least sound even when he placed his ear right against him. If this holds good of the deception of the hearing, it cannot be less valid in respect of the illusion of the eyes, which of all of the senses are the most easily cheated. For that matter, all of our senses are feeble and are open to delusions and glamours. 400 years after Remy's observation regarding human sensory perception, finally, just this month, we learn of a scientific breakthrough that may lead to a better understanding of the phenomenon. I gotta take a break there.
This is the part the watcher's gonna.
I thought you said there were 25 parts.
Yeah,
Why
I
am
guess
I
I
at 27?
This is the last one, but probably the most important.
Okay. And what are you going for here? Like, I just read a whole bunch of stuff, and nowhere in here are you saying, like, here's what we're looking at. What are we going for?
This will explain it.
Okay.
It's worth it.
Yeah.
Okay. Where was that going here?
27.
Yeah. Dr. Gary Nolan does not equivocate in his official statements regarding the quantifiable psychological effects he has studied resulting from UFO encounters. However, his personal remarks are absolute and made from a position of certainty regarding the reality of the intelligence behind the phenomenon. As stated earlier, Dr. Nolan was approached by agents of the U.S. government to conduct groundbreaking research related to encounters by enlisted personnel with UFOs. In a recent interview with Vice, he is quoted on the record stating, "They started showing the MRIs of some of these pilots and ground personnel and intelligence agents who had been damaged. The MRIs were clear. You didn't even have to be an MD to see that there was a problem. Some of their brains were horribly, horribly damaged. And so that's what kind of got me involved." As his work began, the first extensive psychological evaluations were performed to ensure that the individuals involved were not delusional. Next, diving headlong into the abnormalities they exhibited, he began to notice similarities across many of the individuals affected. It was eventually recognized that the area of the brain seemingly being affected, the motor control center, could not have been damaged without killing these individuals. Researchers then realized that what they were seeing was not damage to the brain. It was an overconnection of neurons in the area of the brain responsible for planning, learning, and execution. This aberration ranged from 5 to 15 times that of normal brains. Comparing the neural density visible in the MRIs to scans of some of the individuals taken before their encounters revealed that this condition was already present. Furthermore, it was found that this condition was also present in their family members. Effectively, these people were born with a condition that may afford them extraordinary perceptive abilities. More shockingly, Dr. Nolan states that the 100 or so experiencers studied had a smorgasbord of other symptoms. Smorgasbord. There we go. And about a quarter of them died from their injuries. Dr. Nolan is very cautious not to interject any hypothesis into his official findings. However, he does concede, "I have my private thoughts about what I think is going on, and some of them I'm very, very sure about." Given his claims of personal encounters with non-human intelligence, it is not hard to deduce where his thoughts might lie. He concludes, "When your mind expands to a certain point in terms of what you might consider reality, other entities live there." In summation, though his exhaustive academic research as a member of the Invisible College, through his exhaustive academic research as a member of the Invisible College, Dr. Gary Nolan has scientifically validated what many of us have long suspected. For the first time in human history, he has revealed the existence of scientific data which conclusively proves that skeptics who can neither perceive nor conceive of the existence of non-human intelligences are, in fact, clinically mentally handicapped. I can imagine. This is 28.
This is it. This is the finish.
He told me 25, folks.
Yeah.
I'm already on part 28. I can imagine that many listeners' heads are spinning right now, just as mine was while attempting to assemble all this into an understandable form. And I recognize that there are surely many listeners who still don't understand what any of this has to do with UFOs. Again, I reiterate, try to mute all those preconceptions built up in your mind over your lifetime, and consider the esoteric undercurrent. I hope you enjoyed this wild ride. And if you did, I promise the next installment will be the wildest one yet. Until next time, I will leave you with this one final quote. Why don't they contact us? The skeptics ask. It might be better for us to ask, why didn't they leave us alone? From John Keel.
Okay, Watcher. You have a better understanding
I think
of
that the skeptics would just say, well, those people are the ones with the
The
mental...
Watchers get thrown up all these pictures of brains with the eye of
Okay. So the pictures, hopefully History Shift can get those into a video because those are going to be important. The spinning head with how does this all come together has a lot to do with the Eye of Horus and the way that it's described, but we always focus on the pineal gland and the hypothalamus, right?
I don't.
Basal
But go ahead.
Well, okay, well, neurobiologists do. But the basal ganglia, the thing that Dr. Nolan is specifically talking about is the white of the eye in the overlay of the Eye of Horus on the human brain. That's where it all happens. There are very few parts of the brain that are what are called bihemispheric, where you have crossover between the two hemispheres in the brain. Everything he's talking about is in one of those regions. Now, what he's saying about pilots and people with quick reflexes, people that are doing things like Russ has talked before about people when they go base jumping.
Are you referencing an article you read? Is that what's happening?
Yes, I read. Marty sent me the article at the end of segment 4, and I read through the whole article.
Okay, because we didn't read the article on the show, so you're saying,
right?
Yeah,
I would highly suggest everybody read it and then listen to this so I can make sense out of it if you don't have a background in like neurology.
Yeah, I didn't want to overwhelm any more than we already did.
But the thing is that what he's saying specifically is that people who have a predisposition towards high density of neuronal connections, basically neurons that jump hemispheres, have a tendency towards like the base jumper going off the edge of the cliff, right? And he's just kind of floating there and then he just moves. Doesn't know why, but he just avoided killing himself. Pilots who can move faster than they're able to perceive. Goalkeepers with penalty kicks, things that people have a tendency to do when they have no freaking way of knowing what's about to happen, yet they do it anyway. Those are the people we're talking about. Then they're exposed to whatever it is that emanates from these materials. In the article, Dr. Nolan talks about how the isotopic ratios of magnesium in these things are way off in ways that make no sense. I got nothing for you on that. What I can say is that it seems almost as if the materials relative to us are in flux in some weird way. That flux, or whatever the exposure is, causes these areas to create more neurons that jump across both hemispheres. Now, I can't say for sure what any of it means, but I can tell you what it implies in a strong way. People who have a predisposition towards being able to react to things before they happen have that increased. And if you look at the experience of people who are given messages, prophetic vision, being exposed to the entity increases their ability to have prophetic vision. the side effects that are caused are all the same side effects that untreated paranoid schizophrenics have, and a lot of them are killed by it. But it gives them the ability, at least on a anatomical level in the brain, to potentially foretell the future.
And notice that these people that were studied, which there were over 100, were the people that encountered the entities.
Yeah, and he says
they have the ability. He's implying, actually, in his personal comments, he says they have the ability to perceive a reality that normal people can't.
Yeah, but he starts out by saying some of their brains were horribly damaged.
That was what they initially thought.
Yeah.
But as they went in, it wasn't damage. They were changed.
I would actually venture a little past that to the ones who he has the ability to see MRIs prior to the exposure. He can draw a direct correlation. It seems like, and I can't say this for sure, but that some of them probably were horribly damaged, but that's because those weren't the brains it was looking for.
Yeah,
Well,
it also notices that he says that 25% of them died from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say that's probably damage, right? You would call that damage. He says out of the 100 or so experiencers, they had a bunch of other symptoms, and a quarter of them died from their injuries.
I think that he's not giving us all the information because he says there were a smorgasbord of other effects. Symptoms. We don't know what those. I do know what some of them are, but that's something we're going to be talking about in the next episode. But
so another thing to make very clear, the cerebellum is the actual thing that carries out the action of physical movement, balance, and all of that. The area of the brain that we are talking about is if someone's holding a gun to you and you go, I need to do this to get the gun out of his hand before he shoots me, that's the part of the brain where this occurs. The reasoning connected to motion, the predictive, the contemplative, oh shit, what do I do now, is where this happens in the brain. So whenever somebody you would describe as quick on their feet or able to...
Yeah, this says it was taking place in neurons in the area of the brain responsible for planning, learning, and execution.
Right. So like somebody who can trip over something and it looks like they're going to fall, but they take like 8 weird steps that make no sense and they don't fall down. Those are the people we're talking about.
That's not planning or learning or execution.
It is, though.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that it's because they don't know they're doing it. In most of these people, they're not conscious of the fact that they have...
Well, I'm just saying that I don't think you would qualify that as planning, right?
He refers to it as intuition.
Yeah.
Well, it says here that so they realized what they were seeing was not damage to the brain because they've realized like if that was actually damage, it would have killed them in the motor control center. But it was an overconnection of neurons in the area of the brain responsible for planning and learning and execution, which those aren't intuitive responses to like immediate stimuli.
I didn't write this
instead of tripping, think of it in terms of a pilot going Mach 1 who all of a sudden has a blip come up on his scope and he banks left hard and then does a bunch of random stuff that if he would have done it any differently, he would have stalled or gone into some sort of horrible spin that would have killed him.
Okay.
You've heard me try to talk backwards why I did something to explain to you how it all makes sense and how it horribly fails every time.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing.
And I spent all that time telling you you're not planning that stuff out.
Right.
You think you are after the fact.
Exactly.
In the audio interview with Nolan, the interviewer asks him if he thinks that these individuals' brains were changed by their encounter.
Mm-hmm. And he says no. They start out this way. He said
they already seem to have had this.
But it gets
so it's
magnified.
Facilitating. I would say it's facilitating their encounters.
Yeah.
So, and he's implying that some people that are diagnosed with schizophrenia may not actually be schizophrenic.
Yeah.
They may have this ability
to
perceive things that we normal people can't.
It says here that, the MRIs of some individuals taken before their encounters revealed that the condition was already present. I would be interested to know, was it magnified after the encounter? Like, in other words, you're still seeing the condition previous to the encounter, but it's not nearly as, like, powerful as it is afterwards. In other words, that the encounter itself.
That's what the article implies.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was implying too.
It doesn't say it explicitly, but it's there implicitly that
the other,
but
they
that still
had
doesn't.
an abnormal density.
That still doesn't.
And then after the event, it was like crazy high density wise to the point where it caused, in some ways, neurological dysfunction.
Yeah,
but that still doesn't say whether or not the vision or the encounter was caused by the increase or the other way around.
Yeah. Right. We still don't know the causal agent here. Interesting stuff,
the other thing is the fact that this seems to run in the family parallels with, for example, alien encounters are very often claimed to run in families.
Right. But
I mean, it doesn't say a whole lot. I mean, he describes this same thing in the brain being similar with people who have schizophrenia. So it's not, I'm not sure if this is.
It's not similar. The symptoms that would be experienced and that are reported are similar. So somebody who had this propensity or the ability to see out past into another realm would have all of the same symptoms as an undiagnosed paranoid schizophrenic. Now that's based only on what's reported, and there are a lot of things that aren't. So there could be other signs, but it would be easy, especially in a time when we had less understanding of neurology, to put them in the same category as paranoid schizophrenic.
You're saying the outward symptoms may appear similar, but once you do a brain scan, they're not. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Okay. But again, to me, this, like the way that this is presented here, and this is like the skeptics don't have this, which is why they don't have these experiences. I say, like they would say the same thing. Like people who have these experiences obviously have something wrong with their brains, is what a skeptic would say.
That's what I was going with it.
Yeah.
Wrong like a fox.
Well, I'm just saying.
Yeah. How would a defect in somebody's brain manifest itself on a radar screen?
Oh, that's not the same.
Well,
thing.
no, but yeah, it is, because some of these are pilots, and I know it's not stated in here, but one of the individuals tested that exhibited this abnormality was involved in the Nimitz encounter.
Mm.
So did the people that didn't have the brain condition in that encounter not see it?
We don't know.
I mean, what?
We don't know.
Well,
it may
I
be.
would wonder.
They're not telling. I'm shocked that this information came out at all. First of all, this is the first official acknowledgement that I know of them validating deaths related to UFO encounters.
Yeah. Well, they're validating it as deaths related to brain problems.
But all of these people were people that had encounters.
Right. Which
I'm just not.
The simplest explanation is the encounters are explained by the brain problems that eventually killed them. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just telling you that that's the, I can see that skeptic path easily.
That's not what Nolan
Although
thinks.
I see where you're going with that. The information Dr. Nolan presents of the people he's able to see prior to exposure, they were in no way anywhere near any type of signs that they would have neurological damage. They had an abnormal density of these neurons, but not in a degree that's like unheard of. After the exposure, they are changed.
Yeah.
To a degree where they are almost like questionably human based on this crossover.
Right. But it's like Kyle was saying, one way to think about that is like something changed in their brain and then they have this sighting and encounter and it changes them forever. And it's also neurologically damaging and some of them die from it. In other words, that you just don't know which one is the causal agent here.
Yeah, you can't say which one came first.
Yeah.
What I would say is that what it would take for spontaneous neural generation to cross hemispheres, as far as our understanding would go right now, would almost require something as extreme as a direct injection of pluripotent stem cells into the region.
Yeah, well, that just shows that we don't know a lot about the brain.
Well, I mean, I'll agree with you there. But there's no other in currently the canon of neurology. There is no incidence of wide-scale random proliferation of neurons anywhere in any region of the brain, period. Not just this one, but that's just a thing that has never been seen.
That was my
Doesn't
question.
mean it couldn't happen or that, this thing is a cause of that, but I can say for sure that it has never been recorded any other time.
Yeah, how was this missed in the past is my question.
I don't know.
No one ever checked for it, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. It's all an interesting question.
It's groundbreaking.
Yeah.
I will say that it definitely leads us to better questions about what the hell is going on.
Yeah.
For sure. Because this is a nuts and bolts manifestation of whatever is going on. There's a thing happening.
Well, the question there becomes like, is everyone who's ever experienced something have this same kind of scan? We don't know that.
It would be great if we could, from here forward, scan them all.
Yeah.
It sounds like that's what they're studying, that they are working towards that. They're trying, he even talks about in the article that they're developing new equipment to test for this.
Yeah.
Well, I can guarantee you that the radar didn't have that problem.
Yeah, that's right.
So those scenarios you can just, I mean, like you use that as a point, but to me, well, the radar doesn't have this weird brain problem.
So the brain problem can't be
the reason they're seeing it.
No. The brain, right. The radar is tracking the object or whatever. So there is something there.
It's not required to have this brain condition to see it.
No, but maybe the proximity to it is changing something in their brain.
Except that they had this brain condition before they had the experiences. So we still don't know what's going on here.
The brain condition could be the thing that led them to be in the place they needed to be. Possibly. There's no way to say.
Yeah, or whatever the entities are looking for people with this condition to appear to, and that makes them also show up on radar. I don't know. I'm just saying it's not cut and dried. As with all this stuff, it's complex.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
I mean, brains are squishy. They're never dry.
That's right.
And it's a whole new layer to this.
Yep. All right.
But it's very interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks, Marty.
Yeah, fascinating stuff, as always.
The synchronicity that you joined us for this.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. We're just going to go for that's a long sode.
Super long
sode for the end of the year. We were contemplating possibly releasing some of this on the Patreon, but it's all going to be released in the main feed, and maybe we'll do a Patreon episode next week for the Patreon subscribers, for the supporters of the show. And possibly in the main feed, we may just take the week off. So we'll do a nice Patreon episode next week, and then we'll come back after the New Year's. So thank you guys so much. And do we have some producers?
We do. We have one executive producer saying, toward continuing your acquisition of technical marvels. Happy solstice. And that's from Anne. Anne Who Knits.
Anne Who Knits.
Anne Who Knits. $200. Thank you so much, Anne, for the support.
Wow.
And also an associate executive producer, and I'm not sure how to pronounce this exactly, but I think it's Laura Kotu. And she says, hope it works this time. I guess she must have tried to do this before.
I talked to her in email about it not working before.
She says, wish I could do more. Love all you guys do. Happy holidays. That's a $50 donation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And also a donation note from Jocelyn. She says, thank you for the intelligent and mind-expanding contents, discussions, interviews that you create. Jocelyn from West Virginia. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, I think we have more fun making them than you guys do listening to them. So
it is a lot of fun.
We're on the good end of the deal here.
Yeah.
So
should we title this episode "The Musings of Lunatics"? Because I mean, that last reveal, I was like, okay, they're all got brain problems.
Yeah.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. Hey, for all of you people,
everything I said totally wrong.
No, but seriously, for all of you people out there that may have had encounters, that's a joke.
Yeah, of course. You've had encounters.
Exactly.
Right.
But I probably actually have brain damage.
Yeah.
So.
And I wonder if it, does it include just seeing ghosts? Like, does that, because like this study has been done on people who saw like things flying around in the sky, right? So
I think it's all connected.
Right. You think it is, but the thing is like, we're presented with I don't want to go too long here. We've already discussed this.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. Just keep going.
We're presented with the idea that, that people who had experiences with UFOs, because they're studying pilots. The pilots aren't reporting, wow, I saw a ghost in the sky.
Yeah.
All right, but to this.
This is incomplete data once again,
that's
because
what I'm saying.
You have to go and scan everyone's brain.
Yeah.
And then decide which ones had visions and which ones didn't.
Yeah, of course.
Add to this that some of these people that had these encounters also seem to have all of a sudden gained odd abilities.
Yeah.
So
you're also assuming that we could interpret what the scans mean 100% of the time, because we can't.
Who is assuming that?
No, that if we scanned everyone's brains, we'd know.
Right. No, but you might see this pattern that they're talking about. That is.
I think that. I mean, based on what I know now.
No, I'm not assuming anything. I'm saying that you can't make assumptions until you scan everyone's brain.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
You're
the one making a bunch of assumptions about the brain scans.
But you know what they say, man. When you assume, it makes an ass out of you, and me, I'm awesome.
BrothersOfTheServant.com for everything related to the podcast. BrothersOfTheServant@gmail.com to email us. Thanks to all of you who have sent in emails, and we do have the UFO emails that have been sent in, and we will be going over those with Marty at some point in the future. So
if he will show up with less notes,
right? He's not allowed to show up with any notes next time. So we're gonna have a real conversation, a normal conversation, and maybe we can address some of those emails. All right.
Thank you, Marty.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
And happy birthday, shape-shifting Jesus.
That's right.
Oh, man, that just made something else make sense to me. Okay. ITM, everybody.
That's right. We love you guys.
Always have.
Always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Get back to work.
You changed it up on me.
Always changing it up.
Every time.